Hey there, heroes and heroines. Welcome back to the Ultimate Anime Deep Dive with your host, Chronos. Today, we're plunging into part 3 of our epic saga, What If Deku Met All the Past Users Early? That's right, the plot thickens, and we're about to uncover some jaw-dropping revelations. First, a massive shout-out to the creative genius behind this thrilling journey, King Vessel. Your imagination is a powerhouse, and we're all here for it. And to my amazing squad, thank you for your relentless support and enthusiasm. You guys are the heartbeat of this channel. Alright, no more delays, let's jump right into the action and see how Deku's encounters with his quirk predecessors are shaping up. Brace yourselves, it's going to be a wild ride. Chapter 11, It's Time to Be Heroes. 2. Izuku Midoriya winced as he rubbed his sore arms, wading through the lake with Tsuyu Ajiri and Minoru Mineta as they headed to the shore. I had a bowel movement this morning, so those balls will stick all day. Minoru chuckled while Tsuyu pulled him through the water. Mineta-kun, what are the exact ranges for your quirk? Izuku queried, devolving into Midoriya mutter. Is Pop-Off truly sticky to anything but you? If so, how do you put on your clothes? Does it stick to your pillow or bed when you sleep? Do they magnetize or stick to each other? Can you change the shape, weight, or size? Are they conductive to or resistant against dash? And suddenly I'm very sure that Little Ninth knows more about Minoru's quirk than the owner himself. Daigoro Banjo, aka Lariat, muttered. Interesting. If it was conductive to either heat or electricity, it would go quite far. Harumi Kiyama deduced. It's already proven itself waterproof in the lake. Midoriya-chan, stop analyzing Mineta-chan's quirk. Tsuyu interrupted. Izuku stopped, looking at her in sudden surprise. Tsuyu turned towards him now that the Midoriya mutter had ended. Instead of doing that right now, shouldn't we think about our next move? You're right. Izuku agreed as he climbed out of the water and held out a hand to help Minoru. We should make getting help our top priority. It would be best to follow the shore and avoid the central plaza as we head toward the exit. That's true. Aizawa-sensei and Master Breaker have definitely drawn a large number of villains to the plaza. Tsuyu agreed. Several dust explosions appeared in the distance at the plaza, far away from where the kids were where the two pro-heroes were fighting. Izuku grimaced as it was too distant for danger sense to pick up their presences consciously. But there are too many villains. Since these guys had underwater gear, I can safely assume that they were teleported there before or right as they arrived, meaning that all those villains in the plaza are all concentrated on Master Breaker and Eraserhead. Izuku gritted his teeth before saying, Eraserhead's overdoing it. While Gran Torino must have trained Master Breaker accordingly, Eraserhead himself simply won't have the stamina to keep up. Wait. Don't tell me you're suggesting. Minoru gasped. Are you trying to get us killed or something? I'm not thinking of doing anything that'll get in their way or endanger you too. Izuku explained in finer details. But if we can just find an opening and lessen their load, even a little. Bastard, get off. Stop moving, you shits. I almost forgot. We shouldn't leave those guys conscious just to be safe. Izuku turned towards the villains still in the lake. Idly noticing that the yacht had completely sunk, Izuku stepped forward and held his hand over the water. Railgun 2000-volt charge. An enormous bolt of green lightning seared the water, electrifying the villains several times over. By the time it ended, both the villains and the lake were steaming. Why didn't you use that earlier? Minoru wailed. I still don't have enough control over Railgun. Izuku replied while flexing his fingers. If I did this on the yacht, not only would I electrify us as well thanks to the metal boat, but we wouldn't have been able to escape. Izuku pointed out their wet clothes. As you can see, ASU Tsuyu-chan couldn't completely clear the lake in one jump. I see. Tsuyu acquiesced while Minoru sighed. In that case, that was a good call, Ian Shikaro. Izuku nodded. Now then, let's go. A yellow bolt of human-shaped lightning blitzed all over, punching villains at high speed. Denki Kaminari bared his teeth as he double-kicked a large villain in the chest, shocking and sending him crashing into another villain. He'd never been so grateful for Izuku's tips on his quirk usage as he did now. Nearby, Momo Yayorozu and Kyokujiro were taking down any villains that Denki missed with weapons created from Momo's quirk. These guys weren't down at the plaza! Denki yelled as he made his way to Momo and Kyoka. Where'd they come from? Stop your screaming. It's really annoying right now, Kyoka remarked, standing in the center of their formation as the three were backed against a cliff, her eyes darting back and forth between the villains in front of them. A serious, pissed-off expression on her face, while Momo's expression was one of stern determination, and Denki looked like he was stuck between confident and terrified. Right now, we need to focus on getting away from these enemies, Momo stated, her head clearly still on her shoulders. Then pull out a weapon for me, too, Denki loudly requested. I need more variations beyond tap and zap. You're the electric guy, aren't you? Kyoka stated. Hurry up and zap them all. I told you during the combat training, didn't I? We were paired up. I can only cover myself with electricity. I can discharge electricity, but it's not like I can control it. I'll hit you too, Denki explained to them. It's only thanks to Midoriya that he gave me the tip to electro-stimulate my body and increase my physical attributes. So that's why there's some confidence in him instead of complete terror. Momo mulled as she beat another villain back with her metal quarterstaff. You're a man, aren't you? Kyoka sighed. Stop whining. Denki groaned before dodging a sudden punch and blasting forward and embedding his fist and started to shock the villain with his electric aura, who let out gurgles and cries of pain from the electricity coursing through him. Stop messing around, kid! A villain yelled at him, throwing a giant rock at them with elongated arm. Try shocking solid rock. Kyoka plugged one of her earphone jacks into her boot and blasted out a sound wave which destroyed the boulder. Denki watched it happen and caught the now empty arm with his free hand, causing him to be electrified as well. A third villain tried to jump Denki, but Momo threw a created net at him and captured him, making him fall into Denki's electricity as well. Your super speed is all nice and all, but couldn't you have asked for something to help you aim in your costume order? Kyoka yelled as she blasted another sound wave towards a group of villains, bringing them to their knees and rupturing their eardrums. Unfortunately, this left her open to a hidden villain who leapt off the cliff above them and dropped towards her. In a little flash, Denki saved her, making sure to grab just her collar to avoid shocking her. Momo took advantage and shot a created net gun at him, disabling the villain. Done! Momo shouted, causing Denki and Kyoka to look at her in concern for a moment as she crouched down. Then the atom-like positive blue and negative red lights that appeared whenever she used creation started to shine through the fabric of her costume's back. It took some time, Momo explained as it bulged and started to rip from the size of her creation, bursting asunder as a giant white sheet emerged from her back and enveloped both Momo and Kyoka. To create something this big. A sheet? Is it supposed to be a shield? Momo lifted the corner of the sheet and smirked at the villains as she answered their questions. You're looking at a sheet of insulation 100 millimeters thick. Go, Kaminari-san. Denki, who was left outside it, grinned in understanding. That's badass, Yaoyorozu Fukinchu. Now that the problem of friendly fire's been resolved. He glared at the villains surrounding them and raised his hands, electricity surging all over his body. Electrify! Slamming his hands downwards, the earth shattered beneath Denki's feet as he discharged an immense blast of lightning which surged far and wide enough to even reach the USJ's roof. In the frozen landslide zone, Shoto Todoroki and a hidden Toru Hagakure turned to face the mountain zone as bolts of yellow lightning erupted from the ground. As you can see, one of my classmates clearly doesn't mind your deaths much at this point if he's releasing that much power, Shoto muttered as he got close to one of the frozen villains surrounding him. Considering what I'm seeing, Kaminari or Midoriya must have gotten a more dangerous batch than I did. A still-free villain launched himself at Shoto, wielding a knife in his hand. Shoto stomped his right foot, creating a wave of ice that captured the villain in front of him. A staff suddenly lunged at the boy from behind, but he dodged it as if he had eyes in the back of his head and grasped the metal pole with his right hand, ice bursting into existence on the weapon. Toru gasped, watching how Shoto had instantly taken care of both villains in front of and behind him, freezing both of them into ice prisons. Giving the villain behind him a dismissive glare, Shoto yanked on the pole still in his hand, upsetting the balance of the ice he'd formed to keep the villain airborne, and he crashed to the ground. Look out! Toru yelled as she noticed a movement hidden in one of the buildings. A villain had taken a spot to snipe Shoto, only for Toru to instantly lob a rock at his head. Shoto looked dispassionately as he watched the villain fall out and land on his head, knocking him unconscious. Hagakure, right? Shoto watched the invisible girl show herself, with only her gloves and boots revealing her presence. Hey, Todoroki-kun! Stay by my left and take my arm, Shoto ordered while holding out his left arm. I don't want to freeze you by accident. Toru really couldn't do much but comply, seeing that he had nearly done so the moment they got warped in by Kurojiri. At least he kept releasing some heat from his left side, probably remembering that the invisible girl literally had zero protection from the cold surroundings he caused. Now then, I am worried about the others. Let us join them quickly, Momo uttered to Kyoka from beneath the blanket, holding it up to survey the area as Denki's attack stopped. Her costume was torn to shreds, her modesty only being protected by coincidental clouds of dust and smoke. You're looking a little overexposed right now, Kyoka alerted her, causing Momo to chuckle. Huh! I can just make them again, Momo replied with a smile. Extreme growth in multiple ways, Kyoka whispered at the sight of Momo's large boobs. Hearing footsteps coming their way, Kyoka hugged and covered Momo's front, shouting, Kaminari, don't look this way! Way dash! The insulation sheet was pulled off, revealing a nearly shorted out Denki. Are way gals okay? Yes. Momo stood up with her costume fixed. Let's gather and tie up the villains before they recover. Kaminari-san, I'm aware of your quirk's drawbacks, so please sit down and rest a bit before joining. As the trio started to move, a hand broke through the rocky floor, like an undead rising from the earth, and grabbed Kyoka by her boot. Remember, Midoriya, we're just here to see how things are going, right? Minoru whispered as the shipwrecked trio peered over the edge of the lake. Kero. It was just her verbal tick, but Isuku nodded at Sayu's worried agreement. I know, Isuku muttered, keeping a sharp eye on Master Breaker and his teacher. We'll leave the instant it seems dangerous. And if we can't do that, I'm counting on you guys, Isuku said. Right. Daisy agreed. I hope Tenko's alright, Nana fretted. He'll be fine, Hikage consoled. The villains were almost gone. Out of the several villains that Isuku had last seen, there were only a few left, barring Anarchy and Berserker. Anarchy hummed before suddenly dashing towards the duo. First, it was 23 seconds. Eraserhead! She's coming for you! Master Breaker yelled as he drop-kicked one of the villain extras. A villain tried to stab him with a spear only for it to be grabbed and disintegrated. What the fuck dash? The villain couldn't even finish his sentence as he was suddenly kneed in the face. The leader? Eraserhead gasped, sending his binding cloth while glaring at the approaching Anarchy. Then 24 seconds. Anarchy grabbed the weapon and kept running at him. Then 20, then 17. Anarchy reached close and then punched at his face. Eraserhead caught the punch in his palm, wincing as he was forced back a bit from her strength, then elbowed her harshly in her gut. It's hard to tell since your quirk doesn't seem to work on me. Anarchy gloated as the slime around Eraserhead's elbow started to absorb and corrode it. But it seems that erasure can only be kept active for an average of 20 seconds straight. Eraserhead gritted his teeth, then suddenly pulled away as Master Breaker slammed an axe kick on Anarchy's head. Not yet, bitch! He yelled, spinning around and slapping all 5 fingers on Anarchy's arm. The effect was instant as the heroes, students and villain watched the blue biomass turn gray and start flaking off. Eraserhead, as soon as Decay takes her arm, turn erasure on me, Master Breaker ordered, keeping his eyes on Anarchy. For attacking students here, you will lose that arm as punishment. Anarchy hummed before the slime on her arm started to regenerate rapidly, outpacing Decay's speed until it shot off the crumbling part. Eraserhead and Master Breaker gasped in shock as they saw a clearly human arm attached to Anarchy, which was swiftly back covered up. Punishment? You two really crack me up, Anarchy taunted, spreading out her arms. Not only is Eraserhead able to keep fighting capably despite an injured arm, Master Breaker's got such a lethal quirk. Hey, Eraserhead. The Erasure hero blinked as he was directly addressed. It seems that you're a really good teacher. I didn't get much of those before, Sensei. A smart guy like you would have known not to jump down here carelessly if not for the fact that your students' safety took priority over yours. And one would think. Anarchy now turned to Master Breaker. That someone like you would go wild with their quirk or not use it at all. I'm pleasantly surprised. Really. Anarchy's back squirmed before shooting out 4 tentacles that whipped around and latched at the steps behind her. She was instantly pulled back to Berserker's side, taking a seat and crossing her legs. It was only brought here as a deterrent against All Might, but... The grin with too many teeth appeared on Anarchy's face again. Berserker. The Nomu's muscles bulged before it roared. Creak! The roar it created resounded through the entire area, striking primal fear into the pro-heroes and the spying students. We're leaving, Isuku ordered in a tight voice. Never before had Danger Sense blared so loudly. In fact, even without it, he'd have to be a suicidal maniac to take that on. Tsuyu and Minoru nodded silently, with the latter silently weeping tears of relief to finally have the chance to get away from that monster. Use Black Whip to mask yourselves in the water. If you make a noise, you'll draw attention, Daigoro advised. Izuku nodded, releasing Black Whip to slowly surround their lower bodies and push away the water. If they moved now, their waiting wouldn't draw attention now. Master Breaker was the first to move, dashing towards the behemoth with lethal intent. Berserker was faster, smashing his fist into Master Breaker's torso with immense force. Master Breaker only had time to choke out a huge glob of blood and feebly graze Berserker's arm with his fingers as his body folded and practically enveloped the outstretched limb between his legs and torso. What happened next caused Minoru to whine, Nana to scream, and Izuku to partially cover his horrified expression. The sound of the punch was more comparable to the roar of a cannon than the measly thwack punches produced. A rush of air washed over Izuku, Tsuyu and Minoru hard enough to flutter their wet hair and clothes as Master Breaker was rocketed away from the point of impact with an audible blast, his body moving in a way that assured others that a lot of bones had definitely been broken. Master Breaker smashed through a nearby tree trunk, ripping it in half. He continued to skid across the ground before his back hit another tree, and remained there motionless, hopefully unconscious than dead. Izuku suddenly hunched over as a pink aura washed over his body, with white and indigo combating it. Tinku! Let go, you shits! I'll tear them apart! I'll take them to orbit and drop M! Nana was not in a good mood. Berserker wailed as everyone witnessed its arm crumbling away in a strange way. The crumbling effect seemed to go back and forth as if it's regenerating? Eraserhead yelled in shock. And it's potent enough to combat Breaker's quirk? And Berserker's losing that battle. Anarchy stretched out her arm, which transformed to a long-bladed tentacle. She then proceeded to slice the damaged limb off. What a troublesome quirk. I guess a badass like him had to land one final hit before he went down. Super regeneration? Izuku questioned as the Nomu's arm proceeded to grow back at high speed, repairing bone, muscles, and skin in a near instant. Anarchy turned slightly to Izuku's position as Eraserhead glared in shock. Worry about yourself more, Eraserhead. Eraserhead suddenly turned to notice the Nomu had sped behind him now, hulking over him like an ogre. Minoru choked loudly as a splash of blood flew into the air along with the broken goggles of their homeroom teacher. Eraserhead crashed into the ground, with one hand as large as his chest pressing down his back and the other grasping his corroded right arm. Berserker wrung Eraserhead's right forearm, the sound of skin and muscles moving as it tightened and tightened its grip, until there was a snap, and the forearm bent in a way it wasn't supposed to as Eraserhead's hand dropped limp, the pro-hero screaming in pain as his blood started to run down from beneath the Nomu's fingers. Aizawa-sensei! Minoru muttered through his fingers, tears running down his cheeks in horror. We can't get closer, but I also can't abandon Aizawa-sensei. Izuku reached out his hand in frustration. If only I could just grab him from here. As his hand pointed at Eraserhead, and Shimura's mist faded and One for All pulsed again with unlocked power. Eh? That was the reaction for all present as the teacher instantly disappeared from underneath Berserker to Izuku's grip. Yee? Oh, wa yee! Finally! And crowed. That's my quirk, Snatch, little ninth. Lets me teleport anything I wish to my hands. Also, it works in reverse. You're really happy to show up, huh? Harumi questioned. What a time to unlock sixth quirk, Takashi muttered. Let's not question it. Little ninth, hand your teacher over to your classmates and let me take over. The villain's gonna be on you now, Daigoro yelled. Izuku only had time to toss Eraserhead over to Tsuyu before Black Whip formed a shield to block Anarchy arm which had transformed into a bludgeon. Take sensei away, you two! Midoriya-chan / Midoriya! Tsuyu and Minoru yelled before Eraserhead's grown forced to move, especially since Anarchy was completely focused on Izuku for some reason. Your quirk, Izuku muttered, in a way to calm himself. It functions in the same way a Clinter does, right? Like Venom and Carnage. That's why Aizawa-sensei's arm corroded on impact when it was absorbed. The reason why Erasure didn't work on you, you're actually two separate people and this is one of theirs natural form. Eraserhead, who was still conscious enough to listen, hitched in shock. So that's why my quirk didn't work and there was a human form within. Damn it, the leader was composed of a villain encasing themselves with another. But my quirk works on all in my line of sight, so how didn't they at least separate? Not bad, Anarchy congratulated, surprising Izuku with her genial tone. Not only did you make it into the hero department, but you're still as smart as ever. Deku. Izuku hitched in shock, causing Anarchy to take advantage, breaking through his shadowy defense and wrapping his entire body in slime. Minoru desperately clutched one of his pop-off balls before lobbing it at Anarchy's head. The purple ball stuck to her face, causing a small bout of silence as the villain turned to look him in the eye, then absorbed the sticky ball into her biomass suit. Minoru burst into terrified tears again, although that stopped when Eraserhead stumbled to his feet, shocking his student. Release Midoriya right now! Why? Anarchy questioned before suddenly shooting an elongated fist at him. In his weakened and injured state, Eraserhead was unable to dodge or block, causing the fist to impact his face and sending him flying into Tsuyu, now fully unconscious. Now then. Anarchy turned back to her captive, ignoring a trembling Minoru who was gently dragged back by Tsuyu with Eraserhead now hanging from her shoulders. You've even gotten a nice quirk. I guess waiting was worth it after all. Izuku desperately wanted to question who this person was that apparently knew him, but at that moment, Kurogyri appeared next to her. Anarchy. Kurogyri. Anarchy acknowledged. How'd you do? I put 13 out of action, but there were students that I was unable to disperse, and one of them was able to get away. Kurogyri summed up his situation. Considering that, it seems that we'll have to scrap objective number 02. Anarchy got an annoyed look on her face. Damn it! I hate uncompleted tasks. Anarchy breathed before calming herself. We can't win against multitudes of UA's pro heroes. That was the whole point of this isolated attack anyway. Let's go. Eh? Tsuyu and Minoru asked. However, if we can have Berserker fight the symbol of peace. Anarchy tightened her grip on Izuku. Let's smash his pride. What are you planning? Kurogyri questioned as Berserker came to his side. Isn't it obvious? This is mostly for my enjoyment, but... Anarchy brought Izuku close so that she could rub her face against his. Let's take this one with us. That was the limit. Izuku burst out of his slime prison, growing as Pump Up activated. Thankfully, U.A's sport uniform was really sturdy and didn't shred like his school uniform. But that paled to the aura that rolled of Izuku. There was a wave of unsettlement as Izuku burst with a crimson aura of power, his glowing red eyes with black sclerae filled with righteous rage. Another quirk? Anarchy questioned in surprise. This can't be right. You said you were going to take him? Isuku Alex growled, with his deep voice rumbling with blatant wrath. You touch little ninth, you die. You'll kill me? I don't know what's gotten into you, but that's some bold words, Deku. Anarchy teased as she snapped her fingers, springing Berserker to attention. Can you back them up? Isuku Alex moved, punching Berserker right in the stomach. There was a great blast of wind as a shockwave rang out through the air, blew away villains that were still in the plaza and shattering lights that lined the edges of the dome, far away from the point of contact. Minoru and Tsuyu, already warned about stockpile, hunkered down with Eraserhead to avoid getting knocked away. Oh no! Izuku muttered. Oh no indeed. The Nomu had taken the punch without blocking in the slightest. It didn't need to, as Isuku Alex had barely given it any damage beyond bruised skin. What the hell? Anarchy growled from where she was. She had stabbed tentacles into the ground to steady herself, with one arm grabbing Kurogyri. Either that's part of this. She gestured to all over Izuku's Herculean appearance. Or you've got 3 quirks. And Midoriya-chan, Tsuyu called out. You can't fight him. You'll die. Don't worry, he won't. Anarchy called out to the frog girl. I have every intention of taking him alive. I won't be dying, nor will I be taken anywhere, Isuku Alex declared before clenching his muscles as his form started to hunch forward even further. He started growling until with a final yell, his upper uniform exploded into a million tiny pieces of fabric. Look upon me and be prepared for a display of the Armstrong combat style which has been passed down for generations. As he struck down another villain in the collapse zone, Eijiro Kirishima suddenly halted, with tears springing up in his eyes. What the fuck are you freezing up for, shitty hair? Katsuki Bakugo eloquently inquired. Somebody I know is being supremely manly right now and I'm missing it. Eijiro wailed as sparkles and tears of manliness burst forth from him. Deku, what the fuck? Anarchy questioned before shaking her head. Berserker, break his limbs. Sensei can heal them just fine when we get back. Berserker roared forward but was promptly punched in the face, sending him a step. Holy shit! Minoru roared. What in the world? He moved faster than the Nomu could react? Kurojairi screamed in shock. Not to mention, Berserker was forced back a step, Anarchy added. Considering its shock absorption, that would take an immense amount of strength to achieve that. Naturally. Overhearing their words, Isuku, Alex, posed in a way that highlighted his punching arm's muscles, with imaginary flames of manliness surrounding him. My glorious muscles surpass your feeble logic, or this shock absorption. What an amazing personality change, Tsuyu uttered. Is it a side effect of overusing a copied quirk? Definitely, Minoru whispered back. This is too un-Midori-ish. I feel conflicted. Like I'm trapped between awe and mortification, Izuku whispered as he partially hid his face in his hands. I just feel all. Go third! Nana cheered. Avenge Tenko! Do it! Daisy and Daigoro roared. Super strength, hyper speed, super regeneration, and now, shock absorption, Takashi uttered in panic. No doubt about. This practically has my brother's mark all over it. Izuku, Alex, rushed forward with another punch, leading Berserker into another clash when suddenly Izuku, Alex, ducked and sidestepped the punch, then bringing his arm up, locked up the Nomu's head and arm. With a roar, Izuku, Alex, tripped up Berserker's leg and slammed him to the ground with a grapple. Holy shit! Minoru yelled in excitement. Go, Midoriya! You heard the kid! Go third! Daisy cheered. You can do it! Izuku encouraged. I have many ways to take down an opponent if my fists aren't enough. Izuku, Alex, roared as after Berserker shoved him off, Izuku, Alex, quickly twisted his legs around his opponent's neck, trapping his arms and yanking. Izuku, Alex, increased the pressure, forcing Berserker's head into its shoulder until suddenly. Crack! The Nomu roared in pain for the first time in months, starting to thrash about wildly as its shoulder bone broke severely. Beat this miserable bastard! Daigoro cheered. Break his fucking neck! Nana yelled. That's murder! Izuku yelled back in shock. As the Nomu threatened to actually lift up Izuku, Alex, by just its arm, he switched holds again, landing in a position that left him stomping his entire weight on Berserker's wrists. Insolent fool! I haven't used this move on anyone else in my life except the worst of them all. Izuku, Alex, grabbed Berserker's thick neck and started to wring it. He raised his right hand before curling it into a fist, adjusting each and every finger for maximum impact. Behold the bloody beatdown! Oh shit! Haikuchi cursed, surprising everyone. In a swift move, Izuku, Alex, punched Berserker right in the brain with such force that the latter face literally rippled from the power, shock absorption, be damned. I knew that exposed brain was a glaring weak point, but the brain? Izuku squeaked. More. Nana was merciless. Izuku, Alex, obliged, continuing to punch the literal crap out of Berserker with a fist so fast and powerful it left afterimages and shattered the ground beneath Berserker's head. After a solid 30 seconds of nobody having the guts to interrupt his pummeling, Izuku, Alex, stopped and jumped back. There was a thick silence as Berserker struggled to get up but stumbled, its weak cries sounding more pitiful than threatening. What the hell? Anarchy wondered at what she just witnessed. This is too out of character. Who the hell are you? You're definitely not Deku. She's figuring it out, Izuku fretted. How does this girl know you? Takashi inquired. I don't know, Izuku yelled. And not just the pro heroes, the kids here are scary too, one of the still conscious villains around uttered. With most of our forces depleted, what do we do? Relax, we still have Anarchy-chan and Kurojairi-san here. The other villain next to him consoled. Besides, his pessimistic partner's eyes widened before he moved, trying to stop him from uttering those cursed words. Things couldn't possibly get any worse. There was a long beat in which everyone present and conscious, except the Nomu, regarded the optimistic idiot. Kurojairi, no matter what, we're ditching that guy, Anarchy ordered with a blank face. Understood, Kurojairi replied. Despite his lack of facial expressions, his equally blank tone was clear. The League of Villains doesn't need tempters of fate in its ranks. There was a deafening bang from across the plaza, everyone's attention switching to the source as the doors to the USJ are smashed right open as something, or rather someone, finally makes their entrance. In that moment, As if a higher being decided to answer the optimistic villain with cosmic sadism, footsteps echo out as a tall, hulking and familiar figure appeared. The despairing villain turned to the optimistic villain. "If we survive him, remind me to educate you on the wise words of Murphy." The symbol of peace slammed his foot down, the dust kicked up from his destruction of the doors billowing around him as a golden aura briefly manifested around him, which matched Isuku, Alex's crimson one. "Have no fear, students." All Might aka Toshinori Yagi's teeth were clenched tight, shadows in every crease upon the man's face, set not with his smile, but in an expression of primal fury. "I am here." Chapter 12. It's Time to Be Heroes. 3. I had a bad feeling, so I tore away from my chat with the principal and hurried here. I passed Idashounen on the way, so I've gotten a rough idea of the situation. Each step the symbol of peace took sounded like a gunshot in the nice silence, nearly every villain in sight paralyzed at the sight of him. God damn it, it makes me angry, especially as my escalating gut feeling might have been, one for all, sending out distress calls through Midoriya Shounen and Ai's connection. Thinking of how frightened the students must have been, and how hard my colleagues must have fought. But that's exactly why that right now, I must proclaim for all to hear. "Have no fear, students," All Might, aka Toshinori Yagi, declared as he ripped his tie off like a pissed-off dad, his very presence like a metaphorical star blazing away the darkness. "I am here." Anarchy sighed, her sight focused completely on the hero. "The last boss is here. Berserker." The Nomu gathered itself, but All Might didn't even focus on it. In a blast of air pressure, Tsuyu Ezui, Eraserhead, aka Shota Aizawa, and Minoru Mineta had been moved towards the stairs while All Might cradled the unconscious Master Breaker, aka Tenko Shimura, in his arms next to Izuku Midoriya. "I'm sorry, Tenko." All Might apologized. "I should have been here." "He'll be fine." Izuku, Alex, took All Might's attention. "He's always been strong." "Why, yes." All Might took a shuddering breath before double-taking at Izuku, Alex's appearance. "T that form." "Nice to meet you, 8th. Izuku, Alex, saluted. "I am the 3rd. There are lots of words I've always wished to say to you, but considering our location, I'll summarize it. Well done!" With that, Izuku, Alex, drew All Might, and the unconscious Master Breaker by proxy, into a bear hug. "Right. Alex was always a hugger." Harumi Kiyama sighed. "I'm hugging All Might," Izuku squealed. "I really don't want to know if it's possible to faint in here, little 9th. Daigoro Banjo, aka Lariat, yelled. "All right. Thank you. However, I must ask that you return Midoriya Shounen's body, 3rd San. Let's not put him in more danger than needed." At the 3rd's nodding and shrinking, All Might cleared his throat and ordered the 3 students. "Everybody, back to the entrance. I'm leaving Master Breaker and Aizawa-kun to you all." After gently setting Master Breaker in Izuku's arms, he turned to face the villains and put himself between them and the students. A small distance from them, the optimistic and despairing villains laid down pretending to be unconscious when All Might hadn't hit them as hard as he'd hit the others on his way down. Neither was stupid to gain the attention of an All Might who was too pissed off to smile. Izuku, holding Master Breaker over his shoulder and neck, was trying to dissuade All Might from going into battle. "That brain villain took one for..." He stopped himself, realizing he was about to name his quirk in front of Tsuyu and Minoru, before quickly correcting. "I smashed him with both stockpile and pump up, but he wasn't phased at all. He's too strong with shock absorption and super regeneration. Not to mention, the slime villainess has all the powers of a Clinter from that comic Tenko and I showed me earlier, and that villain covered in purple mist is the one who brought everyone here with a warping quirk." "Midoriya Shounen!" All Might cast his arm out towards the boy. The hero then looked back at his successor and made a peace symbol over his eyes while smiling reassuringly at him. "Your worry is appreciated, but I'll be fine." "He'll be fine, little 9th. Right now, remember that you're still a learning student and leave it to him," Takashi Shigaraki ordered. "Yeah. Toshi's gonna break them good." Nana Shimura, aka Jita Charger, cheered sadistically. "You disturb me, Nana." And Shimura muttered. "Alright then. 3rd used submission techniques, so please try those." Still seeming unsure, Izuku nodded and started to head back to the entrance, Minoru coming to his side to help him with Master Breaker while Tsuyu followed behind with Eraserhead. "Pressure, not impact." "Understood. Go, all of you." All Might turned his attention back to the villains, who had strangely been waiting patiently for him. Wary of Izuku's message, he then dashed forward with his arms crossed in front of him, hoping to target Anarchy with an air pressure attack. Carolina Smash! Berserker! At Anarchy's voice, the Nomu swiftly moved and blocked the twin slash of All Might's arms with just his torso by simply standing there and taking the hit. Great splashes of water burst into the air from as the force of All Might's attack disturbed the lake behind the villains. The hero's grin faded in confusion as he straightened his body, seeing that his attack had no effect on the villain in front of him. Shock absorption indeed, huh? Just as Midoriya Shounen warned, he's completely unharmed. All Might leaned back to avoid a brutal bear hug from the Nomu, missing him by inches before his fist blurred with speed straight into Berserker's abdomen. The Nomu quivered at the moment of impact, but steadied and tried to slam its hands down on All Might. I can kinda see the necessity for Berserker's existence now, Anarchy muttered as the two titans duked it out, with All Might mostly keeping up an offensive that dealt no damage. Even though his punches are doing no good, All Might's still fast enough not to get blindsided like the other two. It seems Midoriya Shounen's suggestions are the ones to go for. All Might laughed as he ducked under a swiftly moving hand that had attempted to grab his face. He quickly got behind the Nomu, grabbing him around the abs, and lifted the villain off its feet. All I have to do is render him unable to move as he wishes without relying on knockout power, and then it's on to you. Connecticut Smash! All Might fell backwards to slam Nomu into the ground with a German suplex, the force of the super move sending a massive plume of dust into the air that blocked them from sight and shaking the ground of the facility. Izuku, Tsuyu and Minoru were all watching over their shoulders as they nearly reached the stairs. Are you guys seeing this? Minoru asked excitedly. That suplex looked like a huge explosion. All Might's on a whole nother level. Ha! Keep preaching. Boy. Nana threw her head back in pride. Sorahiko taught him that one. And instantly popped Nana's bubble. Hold on, something's wrong, Alex reported. Little Ninth, reach out with danger sense. Hikage asked. Izuku suddenly stopped, surprising Minoru and Tsuyu. Berserker's grabbed that of all places? All Might, bent close to bridge position, gritted his teeth and winced in pain as blood pooled around his lips. Oh, come on! He grunted over Berserker's face. What kind of cheap move was that? Rather than being suplexed into the cement, a warp gate of Kurogyries had activated in that spot, allowing Berserker's upper to half emerge below All Might's back and sink his hands into All Might's sides with its insane strength. Berserker's left hand squeezed down directly into All Might's scar, causing it to reopen. Hold him there, Berserker! Anarchy stepped forward and transformed her hand into giant sharp claws. Raising it up, she slowly dug in and ripped it across All Might's unprotected chest. All Might growled in pain as his usually impenetrable skin and muscles were torn through with acrid smoke starting to come off, as Anarchy's acidic biomass corroded what it couldn't cut. I was able to cut through but not as deep as I wanted, Anarchy observed before turning to All Might's stunned face. Surprised? The truth is, even though Berserker here is the MVP, all three of us here have the potential abilities to kill you. Berserker's strong and fast as you are. I have my acidic biomass and Kurogyri. Why don't you explain your part? All Might grunted as he now had both of his hands on Noma's, attempting to loosen the Noma's grip to free himself. Normally, I would not want blood and viscera flooding the insides of my warp gate, Kurogyri told the hero as he struggled to free himself from Noma's grip. But I will make an exception for a hero as great as you. You are too fast for the human eye to see and too strong for any human to keep a solid grip. Restraining you was the Noma's job. Weakening you further to disable your escape was Anarchy's job, especially thanks to her acidic and body manipulative abilities. And after your body is pulled in halfway into my portal, squeezing it shut and tearing you apart is my job. And with that, our potential becomes certified, Anarchy finished. All Might! Everyone turned to see the approaching Izuku, who was running towards them in a panic. He then stopped at the sight of him and stretched his hand out. Steal! What? Anarchy and Kurogyri yelled in shock as All Might literally disappeared from Berserker's grip to end up in Izuku's. Unfortunately, All Might's sudden and larger body weight brought them both down as he reappeared in front of Izuku. Another one? Anarchy yelled out in shock. That's for quirks now. Are you one of Sensei's long-lost descendants or something? I will not allow that! Kurogyri suddenly stretched forward, his form widening over the one-for-all champions. It looks like we now have legitimate reason to take this boy. An explosion struck Kurojiri a second before the warp villain was about to send All Might and his successor through another warp gate, the blast of fire and smoke surprising both the villains and heroes. Get the hell out of my way, Isuku! Katsuki/Bakugo shounen! Isuku and All Might gasped as Katsuki Bakugo roared, bringing Kurojiri down to the ground with a firm grip on the villain's neck armor. Ice shot across the concrete, freezing Berserker through the warp gates Kurojiri had created. Shoto Todoroki carried a stony expression on his face with narrowed eyes levied at the villains. One of your poorly trained thugs told me you're here because you think you can kill All Might. Or why? Eijiro Kurishima came down with a swing of his hardened arms but was easily blocked by Anarchy. You're in the way. Go away. Without looking, Anarchy's biomass surrounded Eijiro's arms before she threw him towards Katsuki. A quick block of ice stopped him from hitting Katsuki and forcing them to lose Kurojiri. Anarchy's killing intent froze everybody. Her biomass started to trail off her in multiple miniature tentacles, giving Anarchy a demonic visage as her pale white eyes glowed a bit. How? How could you let yourself be captured by Kaken of all people? That revelation sent shocks through All Might and the students as Anarchy referred to Katsuki with his childhood nickname. Who the hell are you, bitch? Katsuki growled unsettled. His eyes went to look at Isuku, but the Broccoli Kid's utterly shocked expression proved that he himself didn't know how she'd gotten that name either. Kurojiri struggled against his grip but was quickly discouraged by Katsuki setting off a few explosions against his neck armor. Don't move! The blonde brought his face down close, giving the villain a malevolent growl. You try anything funny, and I'll blow your ass up right now, you got it? They'll be cleaning you up for weeks. Anarchy calmed down and was almost annoyingly impressed with the way events had turned. They've escaped uninjured and captured my two strongest players. She thought out loud. Plus, Deku's managed to safely retrieve All Might in an instant. Kids these days really are amazing. They make the League of Villains look like amateurs. I wouldn't mind that if it was Deku. But if Kaken's having a hand in it. The villainess turned to her ace in the hole, almost literally. Berserker. In an instant, and totally uncaring of how much pain it must have been in, Berserker pulled its body back through the warp gate, the Nomu's frozen right arm and leg falling off its body and leaving ice-covered stumps on its shoulder and thigh. Even though his body's frozen and literally broken, Izuku questioned as he and Shoto gawked at the disturbing sight. He's still moving? I thought the ice would at least numb his body a bit. There's a good chance its body has had its sense of touch cut off. Daisy August grimaced. Makes sense. Nana agreed. Shock absorption wouldn't be that dangerous if he still retained his ability to feel pain from the impacts. All Might flung out his arm to the side, commanding his students. Get back, everyone! Everyone's eyes except Izuku's widened in surprise as the ice broke off of Nomu's amputated limbs, red muscle fibers expanding and growing from the area. And there's the super regeneration Midoriya Shounen warned me about. So Deku warned you, huh? Anarchy spoke as the Nomu's muscle fibers and limbs reformed in seconds. Well then, what now, All Might? How will a brawler like you beat what's essentially a sentient punching bag that was modified to take you at 100% and hits back just as hard? Even when you were warned, you still initiated with punches, didn't you? After all, suddenly changing your fighting style in a battle is something every experienced combatant knows not to do lightly. The symbol of peace and his student grimaced at the words. A punching bag that hits back? Normally, that'd be good for training, Takashi mumbled. First of all, taking back our gate is a priority. Berserker, be sure to splatter Kaken on your way. Incoming danger to Katsuki. Even if danger sense warned him, it was still too fast for Izuku to react as the Nomu practically vanished from its position near Anarchy. He's fast. All Might thought as Berserker charged at Katsuki in slow motion as he was able to perceive the speed the Nomu could move while his students were unable to act. Berserker punched, creating a blast of dust that looked like a breaking wave exploding from his punch at Katsuki and smashing a body into a nearby wall. Blown back by the power of the punch, Izuku and the other boys were now more than 10 meters away from the impact site in a close group. Izuku himself landed his butt on the ground, groaning. Such force! He gasped and looked up. The dust cleared, revealing Berserker, fist extended while kneeling, one hand on the freed Kurojiri and Katsuki nowhere in sight. Kaken! At your side. As danger sense decried, Katsuki was right there. Stunned, but right there with them, and not a bloody pancake. Katsuki? You dodged? That's amazing! No, I didn't. Shut up, you damn nerd! Katsuki instantly replied. I didn't. No. I couldn't see anything. In that case, then how? Aijiro questioned. Then that was. At Shoto's gasp, their eyes went to the wall between sections that had a hole blown into it, skid marks in the concrete along with the smell of burned rubber. All Might stood in front of the ruined hole in the wall, his shirt torn around his biceps, coughing and panting from having taken that hit. All Might! Izuku gasped. Anarchy narrowed her eyes as she realized what had happened. So that angry Pomeranian was worth protecting, huh? Shoto narrowed his eyes and lowered his head towards Anarchy. He was prepared to finish this fight once and for all. We've got them outnumbered 5-3. Izuku nodded along in agreement. And Katsuki knows Kurojire's weakness. These guys are crazy, but if we back up All Might. Aijiro readied himself in solidarity, hardened his arms and shifted his stance. We can push them back. No! The boys looked over at All Might at his words. He held his arm out towards them, palm outstretched in a gesture to stay back. Get out of here! All Might, when I came back, you were already in their clutches. Izuku prepped himself, stockpile, coming alive in his body as Black Whip slithered off his arms. You're injured and need help. That was a different story, but thank you, Midoriya Shounen. Izuku blinked at All Might's words as the symbol of peace changed his left arm from being in a stay-back gesture to a clenched fist in preparation for throwing a punch. It's gonna be alright. Just sit back and watch a hero give it everything he's got. But Izuku still wasn't too sure. But you're almost out of TI. He gasped as he stopped himself, almost revealing the secret. All Might popped the thumb up on the fist that he had formed, comforting his successor that it was going to be all right. He had this. Anarchy had had enough of this. Berserker, kill him. Kurojire, take Izuku. I'll deal with Kaken and the other two boys. It's true that I barely have a minute left, no thanks to that brain guy crushing my scar open. All Might clenched his right fist as he thought to himself. My power's now declining faster than I thought it could. The villains and the hero students prepped for combat as Anarchy made it clear she wouldn't be excluding them. But I must do this. Why? Because I am. All Might grinned in determination and Izuku gasped in wonder as they simultaneously felt the power of One for All surge into full throttle, 9 different souls, no, champions working together to form a star, born from a black void into a soft white, then electric blue, then crimson, leaf green. Then orange, then indigo, then neon pink, then finally, a blazing golden comet of power. The symbol of peace. Anarchy flinched from the sudden increase in pressure, turning towards the hero. All Might tensed his legs and shot forward like a howitzer, with Berserker burring towards him, a constant wall of muscle and aggression. Their fists impacted, a blast of air shooting out from the contact, and a shockwave ripped through the air and rippled through Berserker's arm. Everyone but the two combatants was blasted back and away from the battle. Weren't you warned about the shock absorption? Anarchy grunted as she righted herself in the air and landed on her feet, using tentacles to anchor herself to the ground. After everything, you're still relapsing to your punches? All Might smiled mockingly at her. Yeah? What about it? Grunting with effort, All Might fired another solid punch at Berserker, striking the Nomu in the arm that he used to block. All Might and Berserker exchanged another 3 blows before they each kicked it into high gear, throwing punches at each other so quickly that their arms were just blurs of speed and power. A head-on fist fight? Izuku yelled as he used Black Whip to anchor himself, while Katsuki clutched his shoulder to avoid getting blown away. It's a pummel duel! Daisy roared as she cheered on the speed of their attack rushes. What incredible valor! What respectable muscles! Alex praised. I can't get near them! Kurojire grunted as the wind blew away even his misty body. The concrete cracked beneath All Might's feet as he and Berserker continued to trade blows. Midoriya Shounen said your quirk allowed you to absorb impacts, not nullify them. That means there's a limit to what you can take, right? Izuku and his classmates could only watch in awe as each punch parry caused trees to be uprooted and blasted into the air, solid concrete to be torn and tossed up like paper balls, and a miniature hurricane to sweep around the plaza and prevent anyone from interfering. Despite its shock absorption, All Might's strength was just too much for Berserker to bear. Made to fight me? If you can withstand me at 100%, I'll bring you down from beyond that. With a mighty roar, All Might sent Berserker flying and caused a rooster tail of dust and rubble from his movement alone to follow. What the hell? Anarchy asked in a faint whisper as she witnessed the battle between All Might and Berserker ratchet from an even fight into a beatdown. A hero can always break out of a tough spot. He landed a judo throw, sending Berserker away only to blitz past and meet the Nomu's face with an uppercut that launched him into the sky. And is always ready and willing to smash through any trouble. As Berserker flew high up to nearly reach the ceiling, All Might reached it in an instant, raised both his fists, clamped them together, and slammed them into the Nomu. The attack hurled it downwards at devastating speed till it cratered the ground so hard the entire plaza shook from the impact, the ground fragmenting and rupturing like the surface of a frozen lake. Hey, villain! Did you truly believe that you could take on the symbol of peace? All Might landed in high speed just as the Nomu started to bounce from the touchdown impact. He cocked his huge fist and gathered power. Just who the hell do you I am? Look upon me in despair! Once again, a golden aura blazed around him before concentrating into his fist. The overcharged fist blazed into actual golden flames and white steam as it slammed into Berserker, backed by the power of 8 champions and 1 precedent, all united as one to break the limits of the Nomu's shock absorption. Washington Smaws! An earth-shattering explosion of force bursted from the impact, sending Berserker flying into the domed ceiling of the USJ, turning the giant fixed lights into fireballs when it crashed through the 5-meter-thick roof and shot into the sky, parting several clouds along the way until it became a twinkle in the sky. Did I get ice-skied into a video game or something? Aijiro mumbled faintly at the sight he and the others just witnessed. That was a S-grade finishing move right there. That brute strength is so manly. What insane power, Katsuki commented. Does this mean that he rushed at him so fast that his regeneration couldn't keep up? That and he used so much power that shock absorption couldn't recover. Isuku agreed. Take a good look, little ninth. Takashi smiled. One day, you will be stronger than him. So this is the hero he wants to surpass. Shoto thought. I'd wish him good luck, but I hate him. Is this the peak of the number one? Katsuki wondered at how far he'd have to go be better than what he just saw. I really have gotten older and weaker. All Might chuckled weakly from a cloud of dust and debris formed around him as he stood up from his punching form to clutch his shoulder. In my prime, 5 hits would have been enough. But this took 308 hits. And now. Steam came off of All Might's neck, showing just how down to the wire this had gone. I'm seconds away from shutdown. Now, villains. All Might turned to face Anarchy and Kurojiri, the steam from his body mixing with the dust cloud to create an impressive visage. I'd like to end this as soon as possible. Whether by your surrender or my fists, I'm fine either way. Anarchy bared her teeth. I should have known better. This is the hero who ripped through Sensei's face and lungs after all. Still, if he's weaker now, what force of nature was he in his prime? Mountain Zone. Hands up and no quirks allowed. Denki Kaminari and Momo Yayorozu gritted their teeth as they stared down a villain who had taken Kyokujiro hostage. If you use your quirks, I'll kill this girl, Tesla threatened as he held up Kyoka by her neck, her toes barely managing to scrape the ground as she nearly choked from the strain. Jiro-san, Momo whispered. He got us. We completely ignored the chance that someone might have been resistant to my quirk. Denki growled, releasing some sparks in his anger as he and Momo put their hands up. He was probably the one Todoroki-san said was jamming communications. Momo figured it out as Tesla brandished electric charge on his spare hand. I'm coming over to you. Tesla chuckled as he moved closer, occasionally displaying the electricity he took from Denki's attack. Don't move. As Tesla came closer to him, Denki suddenly had an idea and smirked. Oi, Skullhead. Why don't you switch Kyoka-chan for me? Tesla stopped. Huh? Ignoring the girl's looks of confusion, Denki pressed on. As a fellow electric type, I can tell. Your quirk lets you harvest and manipulate electric currents. That's probably how you can even block something like electromagnetic waves passively. But there's a weakness, you can't generate any electricity yourself. Momo and Kyoka startled in surprise then gasped at his next words. If you have me instead of her, you get to close that one chink in your armor. I see. As electric types, we can intuitively scope our fellows' capabilities. You can discharge as much as you want, but lose control once it gets too far from your skin. We're practically opposites. But still. He brought up a sparking hand to Kyoka's face. Do you take me for an idiot? All electric types are capable of retaining a significant amount of excess electricity in their bodies. Do you think I wouldn't realize that you wanted to drain me and leave as easy pickings for these girls? Denki gritted his teeth as his plan fell apart. A kid's naive thinking only works on dumb adults, Tesla explained as he moved closer. Novice heroes shouldn't make light of villains with hostages. Still, your idea's got merit. If you let that skimpy girl knock you out, I'll exchange this punk girl for you. You don't have to be conscious for me to use you after all. As skimpy? Momo yelled in outrage. No choice then. Denki sighed. In one instant, he had activated Volt Armor, causing yellow electricity to dance across his body and amplify his physical abilities. In the next instant, he had blitzed over to Tesla, grabbing his wrists and causing him to release Kyoka. What? Tesla was floored by Denki's sudden speed. You damn brat! The two suddenly burst with electricity, Denki's bright yellow clashing against Tesla's dull yellow. Let's find out whose output is stronger. If I can't drain you, I'll overcharge you instead. Denki yelled out as the two electric types went all out, creating electrical arcs that ran across the entire zone, knocking out some of the villains again when they started to wake up. Finally, it ended as quickly as it started, leaving a ringing silence and a smoke cloud. Wait. Teehee. Kyoka and Momo blinked as both Denki and Tesla had short-circuited themselves, with Tesla taking more damage and collapsing immediately. Way! Denki threw up his arms in victory before coming up to hug Kyoka. Who said you just hugged me like that, Kaminari? Kyoka yelled, although this was mitigated by her blush. Momo on the other hand sighed in relief when she noticed a welcome sight at the USJ's entrance. I can't move anymore. That Berserker guy was too strong. Frankly, if I move even one step, I won't be able to keep up this bluff. I'll go back to my true form. Just a little more. All Might thought. Taking a slight step, All Might shouted. Well? What's wrong? I don't feel like attacking All Might anymore. Anarchy's declaration caused a ripple of shock through everyone, including Kurogyri. Let's go. What do you mean, Anarchy? There's been a lot of changes from my scenario, Kurogyri. Anarchy slowly explained. I need to go back and reconsider, especially with Deku and Kaken's addition to the hero course. Plus, Nizu and his staff are almost here. I really don't want to test our mettle against both the symbol of peace and the demon chimera. At Kurogyri's reluctant nod, Anarchy raised her voice while he formed a large portal behind her. Hey! Any of you guys still conscious? We are. The two ignored villains rushed forward. They had nearly pissed themselves from watching All Might and Berserker clash against each other, and were now just glad their leader didn't forget them. The two whooped as they rushed through the portal with Anarchy waving goodbye at Isuku as she walked through. Bye, Deku! Don't get killed without my permission! Just in time, bullets peppered the area the portal had been just a millisecond ago. Bullets? All Might exclaimed in relief as he looked towards the entrance, and smiled at the sight of Tenya Ida along with the Yui Pro heroes standing at the entrance to the USJ. They made it! Izuku sighed in relief before running towards All Might. He only made it halfway before his vision suddenly faded. All Might, who was already halfway transformed, jerked at the sight of his successor collapsing suddenly like a stringless puppet. Midoriya Shounen! All Might's cry attracted Aijiro, who gasped at the sight of his unconscious class president. Midoriya! With speed he didn't know he had in his shrunken form, Toshinori was at Izuku's side, turning him over to see Izuku's empty orbs. Izuku! Katsuki blew past Aijiro with his quirk, his sights firmly set at the still steaming figure of All Might cradling Izuku. Suddenly, a wall of concrete came up in front of the two, blocking them from getting any closer. We want to make sure that all the students are safe, so please gather in front of the gate. Cementos, aka Ken Ishiyama, instructed. We will deal with the injured here. Katsuki said before heading back with Aijiro. All Might smiled in appreciation towards Cementos before looking down on his unconscious successor. Slowly expanding into existence, a dark swirling warp gate formed just inside an empty well-kept bar. Freedom! Those two villains cheered as they arrived. We're back! Maisure Shigaraki sighed as Anarchy flowed off her, revealing her bluish-gray hair. I always feel so thirsty after I exercise with you. So, Maisure turned to face the two villains who came along, with the one in blue being pushed forward by the one in red. I know we discussed the price of payment regarding the mission, but considering how that went and factoring in my partner's stupid dash, we're willing to ignore all payment and speak to nobody about this if you let us leave with our lives and never contact us again. The red one rushed out. Yeah, what he said. The blue one confirmed. Kurojiri. Maisha motioned to the misty bartender, who was already behind the counter. Pay these two half of the agreed reward. Also, Miguel. Tulio. I don't plan on letting you two go. Not in the slightest. When I call for you, you will come. Or what? Miguel asked timidly. Anarchy jumped from its spot to Maisha's head. As the symbiote's tendrils poured onto her face, her head once again became covered in layers and layers of sharp teeth that looked very much like a shark's, and could easily rip a person into pieces with. The lens formed from the back of her head as well, and when the symbiote had fully bonded with Maisha, her voice changed from her high peppy pitch a deep growling whisper. I will eat both your arms and then both of your legs, and then I will eat your faces right off your heads. You two will be this armless, legless, faceless things, rolling down the street like a turd in the wind. Unless you both do as I say and come as I call. Fair enough. Tulio accepted quickly, grabbing a waving Miguel on the way out. We'll see you another time. Bye, Shigaraki-chan. Miguel waved as if he hadn't just been threatened as they disappeared. A few seconds later, there was a sound of a rapidly fading motorcycle. Sensei. Maisha, unfused with Anarchy, turned to a small TV which was displaying a sound-only call. Even though All Might was weakened as you said, we lost. Plus, while we did leave with the rep of breaking into UA, we definitely didn't leave on our own terms. It's alright, Maisha. A disembodied voice responded from behind the screen, out of sight, and somewhere disclosed. We merely got ahead of ourselves. Yes, we underestimated him. A second voice joined in, more nasally than the deep tone the first voice had. Good thing that League of Villains came cheap. By the way, what about Master and my joint creation, Nomu? He was not retrieved. Berserker's gone, Doc. Maisha dropped without preamble. A literal twinkle in the sky. What did you just say? Dr. yelled as Sensei laughed in the background. Preposterous. That is impossible. No one, not even All Might, could defeat him at his current state. That is what happened, Doctor. Kurojiri answered nervously. More precisely, without coordinates to his precise location, I could not find him, even with Warp Gate. I did not have time for that, due to Maisha's order to retreat. You ordered a retreat, Maisha? Sensei spoke. No, ordered. Tell me why. Remember what I told you about Deku? Maisha muttered while rubbing a finger on Anarchy's rippling but solid surface. He's no longer quirkless. Either he's got a really good copy quirk or he's one of your descendants from whomever woman you did and ditched. Oh? Theirs was hint of interest in Sensei's voice. To think it was exhaustion of all things that brought me down. It's like that time when I overdid the all-American dream plan. Izuku sighed in exhaustion from the surprisingly comfortable bed in the nurse's office with his arms bandaged while hooked to and for. A heavily bandaged Toshinori laid next to him on his own bed. Then again, it was the first time one of the predecessors had to fight an enemy for my sake. Alex had already apologized to him in tears while bear hugging him tight in the hazy world. Because of the situation this time, I can't really scold either of you. Recovery Girl, aka Chio Shizenji, sighed as she turned on her chair to face them. Otherwise, you two might have died. I'm not sure, but I think I might have shortened the time limit of my hero form again. All Might revealed with a sigh. I hope I still have at least an hour. Izuku grimaced. In that hazy world, Takashi had already revealed that due to Berserker worsening All Might's scar bad enough to reopen it, they had to cut down his time severely. If they didn't, All Might would soon be coughing up organs, rather than just blood. It was only thanks to Pump Up and his own willpower that All Might hadn't dropped dead a while ago. From behind Recovery Girl, the door slid open, revealing Principal Nizu and Naomasa Tsukachi. Excuse me. All Might, it's been a while. Tsukachi removed his hat. Tsukachi-kun! Principal Nizu! Toshinori spat out blood as he sat up in greeting. You're here too? Aoyagi-sensei! Izuku sat up abruptly. Is it all right to show that form? Yeah, it's fine. Why? Because he's Naomasa Tsukachi, my best friend in the Force. And as the principal of UA, Nizu is also aware. Toshinori explained to Izuku. On another note, it's a bit weird to hear the words Yagi-sensei. Sorry. I should dash. It's fine, Midoriya Shounen. Toshinori waved away Izuku's apologies. I was your master before your teacher after all. Sorry to cut to the chase, but we could really use any details about Anarchy's connection to Midoriya-kun here. Nizu interrupted. I honestly don't know her. Izuku muttered as he recalled everything he could about her. As he looked down to his hands in recollection, Tsukachi shared a brief glance with Nizu as he slightly pointed his face upwards. Truth. Although, there's something that bothers me. This brought everyone's attention to a peak. She called me and Katsuki by our nicknames, which implies closeness or familiarity. The door suddenly slammed open, revealing Katsuki. Izuku! Auntie Inko's been calling you. Pick up your damn phone so that your mom stops calling mine. Izuku stared blankly at Katsuki's phone. Specifically, the wallpaper on it, as he remembered something memorable happening that day. Eaya! Toshinori startled along with the others. Midoriya Shounen! What's wrong? Did you remember something important? Tsukachi pulled out a notebook, ready to take down any important clues. However, Izuku pointed to Katsuki. She called us Deka and Kaken! Izuku yelled to his childhood friend. All this time, I was thinking it was someone either of us knew. But it wasn't. It wasn't? Nizu frowned. How would she know your personal nicknames then? Because. Izuku stared down Katsuki in the eye. There's a place in which we never called each other anything other than those names. A place where everyone would instantly know whomever those names identified whenever spoken. The others were understandably confused, but Katsuki's eyes widened as well before narrowing in anger. Aldera. In a random street, with several civilians moving about, a sudden news report appeared. In recent news, we have been alerted that Shinya Fukamatsu, a D-rank villain known as the Sludge Villain, escaped prison 4 hours ago, killing 2 guards in the process. The news reporter rattled. Citizens are advised to be on the lookout for sentient sludge. Chapter 13, Meetings I, the Sleepover. It was the morning of the first of the 3 days after the USJ attack. Yui had closed, sending all its students home for that period. Izuku Midoriya breathed softly, completely unmoving of his body while the vestiges of one for all snickered or outright guffawed in his mind. Why? Ochako Uraraka sighed softly into his shoulder, her soft body draped over Izuku's slowly heating up body. Across the living room where most of his classmates slept on the floor, Shoto Todoroki silently slurped up some cooled miso ramen, while Inko Midoriya shamelessly took pictures. How did this happen? 13 hours earlier, while in the infirmary. Class 1A group chat. Gotcha King, alright, so I'm awake now. How is everyone feeling? Does anyone need to talk? Recovery Girl recommends that we don't repress our troubles from today. Berry Trap, Midoriya. Thank God you didn't die, you crazy son of a bitch. Gotcha King, frowny face. Gotcha King, I know that you mean well, but I hate that insult as it attacks my mom instead of me directly. Take it back. Berry Trap. Berry Trap, sorry. Ground Zero, Mama's boy. Gotcha King, Daddy's boy. Ground Zero, fuck you. Scotch, I didn't hear a denial. Ground Zero, I will choke you with your own fucking tape, flat face. Genesis, thank goodness, Midoriya-san. Kirishima-san's account on how you suddenly collapsed was worrying. Ground Zero, I told you. Damn nerd overused his quirks and got knocked the fuck out like a bitch. Fast track, that's immensely rude, Bakugo-kun. Ground Zero, still true. At least if he died for real, he would have gone out fighting. Infinity, I can't tell if that's an insult or a compliment. Gotcha King, after remembering what happened to Aizawa-sensei and Master Breaker, I don't think I can sleep again. And Mom's gonna fret. Ojiro Mashireo, I wasn't there for that. How bad was it? Berry Trap, I am now aware of what bones sound like when being broken and crushed within bloody, meaty flesh. Separate 0 JVZZ. Berry Trap, sorry I puked again. Jade Leaper, I don't blame you, my Neta-chan. The feeling's mutual, Karo. Gotcha King has changed Ojiro Mashireo's alias to Taekwondo. Taekwondo, thanks. That's a punny but good name. Ground Zero, it's punny at best. At least Izuku gave me a damn good one compared to what I might have gotten from Raccoon Eyes. Gotcha King, I know that you guys want to head home, but Niza told me of the school closing for a while. If any of you isn't too busy, would you like to do a sleepover with me? Gotcha King, I mean, if you want? I can sleep well tonight, but if you're too busy. Infinity, I'll come. Fast track, I as well. Ground Zero, not interested. I'm busy with something else. A few hours later. Izuku hadn't expected much. Ochako and Tenya were expected. Tsuyu had declined as she mentioned being with her younger siblings, but Minoru had arrived as well. Probably because they had shared the same disaster zone ordeal. What he did not expect was the arrival of more than half his classmates. The only absent ones were Katsuki, Tsuyu, Koji, Rikido, and Mizo. Even Shoto came, if only to not spend a second longer than necessary with him. It probably wasn't serious as a woman with red tufted white hair, who could have only been his mother or sister, waved him in with a smile. Of course, Mina and Toru instantly scouted for his room, causing Izuku to futilely call on his predecessors for help as he struggled against their pushes. Whoa! It's an all-might shrine! Ochako gushed at the room while Izuku pouted in a corner, already taking a fetal position in embarrassed despair. And here's the midnight figurine that Midoriya and I arm wrestled for. Denki boasted as he pointed it out to Minoru, Aijiro, Siro, and Mashireo. Midoriya's already got so many. He probably won't mind if I take just Dash. Minoru's hand, which had been inching towards the figurine, was suddenly slapped away by a tendril of black whip. It was clearly subconscious as Izuku was busy trying to wrestle Toru, who had clutched a picture of him, an All Might, taken right after the beach training with both of them posing. Never mind. No Endeavor here, Shoto observed, seeing an absolute lack of Endeavor merchandise across the 35% of the room that wasn't dedicated to All Might. No. I don't know why, but he's always scared me as a kid, Izuku replied. Plus, my dad hates him for some reason. I see. Shoto didn't say much after that, but for some reason, he looked at Izuku with some approval and smiled a bit. Several weeks later, he would discover that it was because an avid hero fan like Izuku subconsciously rejected Endeavor as a hero to admire without even knowing about his private life. Ochako Uraraka stepped out of Deku's room, feeling a bit of pity for the privacy that had been broken. You are Akin, right? Ochako turned to see an iPad on video call. There was a handsome man in there which struck her as familiar for some reason. He had white hair, sharp but playful red eyes, and a bunch of freckles on his face. Can you believe that both my wife and son forgot about me still on call? Then again, this is Broccoli Kid's first sleepover. Oh well, it's nice to meet another girl who Izuku thinks highly of. Oh my god, this is Deku's dad. Ochako instantly snapped to attention. And nice to meet you. My name is Ochako Uraraka. I'm a friend of your son. Friends, you say? You seem like a pretty nice girl, Ochako, both in looks and personality. It's rare to find someone who almost matches my wife in a perfect combo of cuteness and sexiness. You'll be great for Izuku. Ochako felt herself blush heavily at the utterly casual tone he delivered those words. What is he saying to me? What do you mean by that? Well, you're the one who changed the meaning of that horrid nickname Katsuki gave him, aren't you? Izuku spent a whole 10 minutes doing nothing but gush about you that night. Ochako blushed harder, while choking on the words that wanted to spill out. She had no idea that simply changing the meaning of his insulting nickname had meant that much to him. I'm not exactly saying that you two need to rush anything, but please be gentle with him. My Broccoli Kid's self-esteem is more fragile than eggshells at the moment. Then again, some physical touching won't be too bad, per se. It worked wonders for me and Inko. I'd mentioned about Masaru, but Mitsuki didn't last a week before dragging him into the nearest closet. Or the library. Or his car. Or that elevator. Or that Ferris wheel. Or that damn pool I suffered to clean before and after. Ochako was like a human-shaped strawberry by the time Hisashi Midoriya cut off his call, wishing her luck as he passed on a lot of tips. Here we are! Izuku already hid his face in his hands, Mina digging an elbow into his side while several others straightened in anticipation. Leave it to Inko Midoriya to come back with not one, not two, but 5 stuffed photo albums for them to flip through. Izuku hadn't realized she'd even kept all this. Who bound a whole collection of their kid eating dinner? She loves you, Denki whispered, sounding positively giddy about it. And yeah, she really did. Izuku looked up at his mom's round, beaming face and felt something tightening up in the middle of his chest. There'd been so much fear since when she heard of what happened earlier in the day. Seeing her thrumming with an excited positive energy that night forced a smile onto his face despite his embarrassment. I wasn't sure which one to show, Inko said, puttering as she laid out each album on the coffee table. Like priceless artifacts displayed before curators. With that, Izuku's embarrassment returned with a vengeance. She worried the edge of a cover, bits of it flaking off against her thumb. If you'd like my favorite opinion, I think you were quite handsome around this time last year. Before you started that training regiment of yours. Like a brohound, Ijiro twitched at the sound of training regiment. Not that you aren't handsome like this, Inko hurried to add, going so far as to pinch Izuku's cheeks. But you had such a grace back then. All long, lean limbs. That's my physique, you know. You've always looked great, Mom, Izuku said, so caught up in the truth of it that he didn't remember to be embarrassed. Her eyes filled a little at the compliment, but didn't overflow. I know, she said, sounding a little choked. With a deep breath she nudged the books forward, dropped a kiss into his hair, and bustled away, saying something about making them some snacks. Denki practically melted into the cushions. I love your mom. I just look at her and I know that's Midoriya's mom. A wonderful woman. Tenya nodded in agreement. I can see much of her in you, Midoriya-kun. While we have the time, I will invite you all to come and meet my family as well. Ochako's head lolled on the cushions. I don't know when my parents are getting back, but yeah, same. As Momo expressed similar views, Izuku leaned to snatch up the closest photo album, not entirely sure he wanted to see all that his mom had saved, but entirely sure that he wouldn't be able to resist. He let the heavy book fall open at random and groaned aloud, drawing his friend's attention. Of course, every photo was a bright collection of red, blue, and yellow. You had an All Might onesie, Toru gushed, slamming herself into Izuku's shoulder to get a better look. He had many of those. Inko's voice came drifting out from the kitchen. I bought 7, one for each day of the week, so that some of them might actually get washed. I don't remember that, Izuku quickly muttered, bright red as the others laughed while Tenya and Momo carefully slid the picture from its bindings. It indeed showed a young Izuku in an All Might onesie, holding himself up with the help of a table leg. What was presumably also an All Might blanket, only the red and blue were visible, had been carefully tied around his shoulders so it drifted down like a cape. Though the real draw was Izuku's smile. Gap-toothed and bright, it very nearly blinded them. The cuteness. It's over 9,000, Denki declared. Nonsense, Hanta countered. It's over 1,300,000. Izuku moaned again. Kyoka traced her finger along a picture's edge as Ochako took the album from Izuku's lap. He let her, grabbing another whose cover was in better shape. It felt heavier though, and seemed to have places that just wanted to fall open. Like they'd been looked at again and again. Did you wear anything other than All Might merch? Ochako asked, sounding more fond than she had any right to be. She flipped through page after page of brightly colored t-shirts, plushies, socks with stars on them, and carefully styled hair. Izuku opened his mouth to point out that at that age he really didn't have much control over his clothing. Whatever he was dressed in was what his mom had chosen, but one look at the picture of him raising an All Might action figure into the air, eyes wide with sparkling adoration, and he figured that the point was kind of moot. He's so fucking adorable, Nana Shimura, aka Jita Charger, gushed. The cutest, Daisy August agreed. He opened up his middle school years instead and discovered a whole new kind of horror. No way, Kyoka whispered. Midoriya, Denki exclaimed, somehow sounding both upset and proud. Dude, I just need to. Nope. Don't fight it, man. Just stand, stand right there. That's perfect. That's Ijiro backed up until he merged with the rest of his classmates, all of them standing and staring at Izuku in a tight little group. He didn't need to look down to know that his whole body had gone flaming pink. Literally. Pump Up had activated slightly, releasing slight puffs of steam. Somehow they talked him into shucking his shirt and standing, shorts only, beside a propped-up picture pinned to the wall. The picture was that of a 14-year-old Izuku at a pool. Mina let out a low whistle. Long and lean. Midoriya really wasn't kidding, was she? Izuku meant to say, no, but it just emerged as a low, embarrassed whine. He hadn't realized it at the time, not with nearly a year of slow preparation, but his body really had changed dramatically during his training with All Might. The picture at the pool showed his same spiky hair and sunny smile, but they were attached to twig-like arms and a nearly concave stomach. Izuku fidgeted as his friend's eyes jumped from the past to the present, no doubt taking in his now broad shoulders, the six-pack abs, hands that were scarred and calloused by sharp objects from the beach. It was a far cry from the skinny boy from before. Sneaking his own glance at the picture, Izuku marveled at how big his head looked, almost like his body couldn't hold it. Small, Kyoka said, pointing like a zombie at the board. You were so small. Denki was clutching at his hair. For real, what the hell? I mean, this explains how I had to use speed technique instead of raw power to win an arm wrestling match dash. Mina side-eyed his arms. Really? But you're like one of those nerds on the makeover shows. You know. Denki mimed dialing up his face. Where they take the skinny twerps and make them hot? That's you, Midoriya. I'm not. Izuku tried, but absolutely no one was listening to him. Oh my god, he is! Nana gasped. Toshi literally took before and after pictures for comparison. It's certainly impressive. Momo was the first to break from the group, trotting over to stare at the picture with chin in hand. She seemed to measure something, nodded, then gave his bicep the same treatment. Izuku yelped at the touch. I'd be very interested to know what your training regimen was if you'd be willing to share it. As well as your diet. That is a shocking amount of progress in a very short amount of time, and I do need to work on my physical strength. Momo sighed, running a hand down her stomach. Your body looks great. Minoru spoke but was immediately silenced. What was your regiment, Midoriya-kun? Ida asked. He too approached the picture, positioning his glasses for a better look. He was like an expert examining art. Izuku shifted. It wasn't like he could tell them the truth. Oh yeah, nothing drastic. I just ran into the world's #1 hero, somehow convinced him to take me on as his apprentice, and he personally trained me until literally an hour before our exam. Nothing anyone can't accomplish. Just don't add anything about one for all. Takashi Shigaraki, aka Wild Tiger Eye, advised. Feel free to add eighth and since it will help in avoiding questions about him seeking private moments with you. True, Izuku mused. I cleaned the beach, Izuku said. He couldn't help but smile at the baffled looks on his friends' faces. You know the spot about a half hour from here? People had been using it as a trash dump and All Might suggested that I clear it for training. It's a way of lifting weights that helps people. Izuku raised his arms, palms up, as examples, unknowing of how his clenched biceps drew female gazes. All Might? Ah, yeah? We ran into each other, and when I mentioned getting into UA, he took one look at my body and prepped a training menu for me. He then suggested that the beach was a good way to realize that a hero is more than just beating down villains. I have to help civilians too beyond just saving them from danger. Aijiro was flat out crying. That's so manly. Is it? It's certainly something, Mashireo said, slapping Izuku on the shoulder. With his tail, he knocked the pin out of the picture and caught it on its way down. He examined it with a wide, teasing smile. You were a twig. He laughed, passing it so Shoto could get a look. Do you still have that menu? Why, yes. I'll go get it. A little while later, Momo dropped the list with a sigh, proclaiming that the list was specifically suited for Izuku's former body type. Izuku's phone chose that time to buzz, causing him to raise an eyebrow at the message he received from Katsuki. Send me intel on any still active or captured villain who can use quirks that can cause earthquakes directly or indirectly. He might have sent back an inquiry on why he needed that but promptly distracted when Mina found more of his action figures. As everyone finished up their dinner, with Momo asking Inko for the recipe, Ochako took a deep shuddering breath as she joined Izuku on the balcony. Sorry if I left too hastily, Izuku mumbled. Something just reminded me of Tenko Anai's condition. Do you know him personally? Ochako asked. Master Breaker, I mean? Yeah. When I went to look for quirks to copy, I went to hospitals to fill my last 2 slots. Izuku mumbled as he made another lie. After I learned that my quirk permanently copies others, I went looking for terminal patients who wouldn't mind me copying theirs. Tenko Anai's grandmother was one. I see, Ochako replied. Yeah. Nana-san wanted a physical way for her grandson to always remember her. Izuku continued. Plus, Tenko Anai is a bit of a hardcore gamer whenever he's got free time, so we actually knew each other online for a bit. Now I'm scared that Tenko Anai might meet his grandmother again much sooner than he should. Ochako said nothing, thinking back to 13's ripped-up back. Such sheer damage from her own quirk that her body had actually forgotten that it was supposed to bleed. Sorry about that. Izuku slapped his cheeks. How about you, Akin? Are you alright? Ochako smiled with a false brightness. I'm fine. She expected that to be the end of things, but it wasn't. Izuku cocked his head to the side, looking at her intently. But you're not. That made her reel in shock. Most of the time when Ochako's world was falling apart, and she insisted everything was fine, everyone believed her, including her parents. She was always fine, that was how she dealt with life. I know it seems easier to pretend everything is okay and just deal with it alone, but it's not. That's actually something I just learned recently. We just went through something traumatic, so you can admit that you're not okay. I'd never think any less of you, Isuku said, that kind smile laced with untold emotion. An experience in hiding his own negative emotions. Against her will, Ochako's eyes filled with tears. Before her mind could stop her, she threw herself at the boy, needing to be near someone who truly sympathized. Her friend who went through the same ordeal but had somehow ended up more stable. He wanted to kill us, Ochako sobbed, wiping her tears with his t-shirt. It was only slightly scratchy against her skin. What he did to 13. What he almost did to All Might. He could have killed us so easily. You're safe now, Izuku murmured as he patted her back, too worried about his friend to be embarrassed from the hug. They're gone now and our whole class is safe. Nobody died. The two stayed like that for a while longer, Ochako sobbing into Izuku's collar. The only one to interrupt was Tenya, who looked at them with some understanding and quietly left them to be. Ochako finally pulled away, once again wiping away her tears. Izuku smiled at her, a kind smile that he clearly had no idea of how beautiful it was. As they made their way back to the others, nobody, not Mina, Toru or even Minoru, called attention to the fact that Ochako's free hand rarely left the hem of Izuku's t-shirt. So then the villain and I clashed against each other, a furious battle of thunder and lightning which I won. I saw you in the battle trial. Now you're just joking. It happened, Mineta. Tell him, Kyoka-chan. Yamamoto. Why should I? It happened, although they both short-circuited at the end of it. I honestly thought that was just a thing for Kaminari-san, not for all electric types. Hey, Kaminari. Denki blinked himself awake, before turning to see Kyoka at his side and rubbing his eye. What's going on? I just want to thank you a bit. Kyoka struggled with her words, her blush very visible even in the darkness. For saving me back there from the villain. Denki blinked in surprise before bursting into a wide grin. It's no problem at all, Kyoka-chan. Chan? Kyoka recoiled at the term. Knock that off, Kaminari. Anyways, is there anything you want? Denki blinked. Like a favor or something? Kyoka fretted restlessly, her movements nearly waking up a nearby Momo. I don't like to owe others. Denki hesitated a bit, already knowing what he wanted but a bit hesitant to go for it. Anything, right? Kyoka's eyes narrowed in suspicion. Yeah. Let me kiss you. What? Kyoka's harsh whisper caused her to wince as others reacted feebly, with Shoto himself instantly sitting up with a cocked fist, only to remember that he was in a classmate's home rather than his and promptly went back to sleep. Kyoka observed him a bit more before grabbing Denki's collar to pull him close. What the hell's going on through your head, you perv? Denki shrugged, totally unrepentant. You asked, didn't you? If you don't want to, it's fine. Really? I didn't save you just so I'd get a reward later. Denki made to turn about, only for Kyoka's grip on his collar to strengthen and push him down as she quietly slid over his form to straddle him. Fine. I'll do it. Just give me a bit dash. Denki shifted, turning over so that he was the one over her now, leaving Kyoka a bit breathless as he stared down at her intensely. You okay with this? Kyoka turned crimson but still stared up resolutely. I just hope you aren't a bad kisser. Denki shrugged at that. Dunno. It's my first time. Your first dash? Kyoka's eyes widened as Denki instantly claimed her lips, fully pressing down on her form with his body. Denki hesitated a bit as Kyoka's hands came up to his shoulders, slowly sucking on her lips. Pulling back to observe, he was pleasantly surprised to note how blank Kyoka's eyes had become, even noting how her jacks were twitching erratically. Was that as good for you as it was for me? Kyoka snapped out of her daze and looked away. And no. Too bad, Kaminari. Huh. Guess I need to practice more. Before Kyoka could react, Denki kissed her again, trailing down from her lips to her neck to her collar. Kyoka could only shudder as she clutched Denki and bit into his shoulder, only to jolt when a stray spark sprung from his hair to her jack. What dash? Kyoka questioned only to hastily stiffen her moan as Denki proceeded to suckle her other jack. These literally electrical sensations, along with the thickness she could feel pressing against her crotch, nearly overloaded Kyoka as Denki started to slowly move his hips against hers. Denki groaned silently as he raised a hand to cup her breast, enjoying how it fit in his hand as he slid it under her top. In a rather delayed action, Kyoka pulled on his hand. Wait a minute! To her surprise and relief, Denki stopped immediately, although she could still see the want in his eyes. For a girl who had never really been seen as physically desirable even by Mineta, this really bothered Kyoka in all the right ways. But still. I think that's enough for the kiss you wanted. Kyoka sat up, hating how she had to put more effort in getting up from him after what had just happened. I need the bathroom. A while later, after she had finished de-stressing and rearranging her clothes, Kyoka would return to find Denki already asleep again. She rolled her eyes but still laid next to him but out of arm's reach. A whole hour later, Tenya, Momo and Shoto woke by habit despite the lack of alarms. Tenya and Momo headed out for a short jog while Shoto stayed around, gratefully accepting a bowl of requested soba from Inko. Another hour later, Isuku woke to Ochako using him as a body pillow. His mother would take lots of pictures for later sharing with his very supportive father against his wishes. It was so nice to sleep between the two of you, Ojiro-kun. Todoroki-kun. Toru gushed. Was my tail that huggable? Mashireo asked. Don't use my left side as a portable human heater again, Hagakure. Shoto stated coldly. The only reason he didn't throw her off was because of how he kept imagining the insulted look on Endeavor's face. Also, Midoriya. Whatever you do, don't get my father's attention. Eh? Izuku tilted his head in confusion. I am serious. Shoto stepped right up to Izuku's personal space. Don't get Endeavor's attention. Okay? Shoto nodded in satisfaction and left. Kyoka sighed as Ochako and Izuku kept glancing at each other, only to look away with large blushes. Off to the side, her enhanced hearing caught Inko's mutterings of new teasing material. The female half of the teasing material bowed profusely as they all left Izuku's home. Next to her, Denki and the other guys patted Izuku on the back as they left, leaving the group to start separating soon until by some weird coincidence, just the two of them were left. Soon, they turned to go their separate ways. Denki suddenly paused. Kyoka stopped as well. They both looked at one another. There's a crepe stand just a couple of blocks over that away, Denki said as he pointed after taking a deep breath. Wanna go? My treat. Kyoka smiled, the corners of her mouth turning up ever so slightly. I think I can spare time for a blackberry crepe. Smiling, the two turned together and walked off in a new direction. You tell Mineta about any of this and I'll kill you. That goes against rule number 18 of the Bro Code. Mineta won't know shit. Chapter 14, Meetings 2, The Visit. After leaving the school, Katsuki Bakugo only saw Yako Momogami for about a minute, tops, before she was sprinting away from him giggling in that dorky way of hers. He eyed the folded piece of notebook paper he now held in his hand which had been delivered to him by the cheerful, underage postgirl that only knew how to say, "Delivery! Delivery!" over and over again. Big, blocky letters, shakily written yet neatly colored in, stared up at him with a premonition of foreboding tagging along. You're invited, it said. What could go wrong? Katsuki wondered as he flipped the card open, only to immediately blanch and sneer upon reading the details. Everything. Everything can go wrong. He and his parents were invited to have dinner at the Momogami home. Underneath the suspicious-looking invitation was an address and a phone number, the writing much more legible than the child's. He recognized it as her older sister's handwriting, having stared at the phone number that was still tacked onto his bulletin board several times over the past few days. Yet the only thing he could bring himself to care about, the only thing he wanted to question at this very moment, was why his parents had been invited as well. Katsuki quickly tucked the letter in his backpack and carried on as if nothing were out of the ordinary, though beneath the surface he was struggling to come to terms with the whole idea of the invitation. He didn't particularly want to go over for dinner at Ayako's, partly because this was an out-of-the-blue invite, but mostly because he had to bring his parents along. Maybe with just his dad around, things wouldn't wind up being so bad. Boring? Certainly. But at least, he never held civil wars with him like he did with his hag for a mother. Cringing, Katsuki's hands buried themselves deeper into his pockets and the boy slouched even lower than usual as he walked along, brooding. Too rude to decline, yet unwilling to go because of the embarrassment his family was, Katsuki was in a bind. Maybe He could just use the phone number he had been given and say that his parents were unavailable and that his schedule was too busy? It was a good idea until a quiet, calm voice that sounded a lot like Isuku shot it down with one question. What about Ayako? What about her? He shot back even as his treacherous mind recalled the look on the little girl's face when she handed him the letter. Already knowing the contents of the letter, her consistently happy round face held a look of absolute surety and confidence that he would accept the invite. Having dinner with her hero would probably be like a dream come true for her. He knew that when he was her age he had allowed himself to imagine such ridiculously hopeful things like that. Having dinner with All Might would have been the equivalent of winning the jackpot in his child mind. Would it be the same way for Red Shoe, too? With a small smile on his face, Katsuki withheld the urge to chuckle out loud. It's a funny feeling to find something endearing in just a single child. Katsuki dropped his smile and sighed in mild frustration while running a hand through his hair. It seemed like he was going to have to figure out how to bring something like this up with his parents. They didn't even know he had saved the little girl and do it in a way that they didn't make a big deal about it. Unfortunately, that was easier said than done. Sighing once more, Katsuki mentally readied himself for the inevitable and picked up the pace. He had a dinner to go to. Gotcha, King. I know that you guys want to head home, but Nisa told me of the school closing for a while. If any of you isn't too busy, would you like to sleep over? Gotcha, King. I mean, if you want? I can sleep well tonight, but if you're too busy. Infinity, I'll come. Fast Track, I as well. Ground Zero, not interested. I'm busy with something else. I'm honestly not sure which one would be fucking worse. This or that shitty sleepover. Crimson eyes stared at the faded beige door with a tamed, sullen expression as the back of Katsuki's head mildly throbbing from his mother's warning to behave himself. The moment he had left his bag unattended on a chair in the kitchen, and apparently unzipped, Mitsuki Bakugo had pounced on the strange yet cute-looking letter she had seen poking out. From there, it had only delved into chaos, head swatting, and awkwardly aggressive guerrilla dances while his dad phoned the number on the paper and assured the Momogami household that they would be more than happy to attend. Those explosions you're hearing? Don't worry about those, my wife and son are just bonding as usual. And now all of the Bakugo family were waiting on the front stoop of the small 2-story home that belonged to the Momogami family. There came the muffled sound of a mini stampede from the other side of the door, and then a pink-haired little girl poked her nose outside. Ayako gave him a wide, beaming grin, and Katsuki could practically hear the silent chanting and cheering going on in her head just from seeing the light in her eyes brighten. Well, are you just going to stand there or are you going to let them in? A voice demanded from further inside the house. The little girl jumped slightly, whatever enchantment she had placed herself under dispelling, and she moved aside to welcome everyone inside. Welcome to our humble abode! Come in, come in! She chirped excitedly. Ever since her sister had begun making dinner, Ayako had been nothing but a pure ball of joy and jitters. She had imagined, played pretend even, having pro-hero after pro-hero step into her home and sharing a meal together time and time again, but nothing quite beat the actuality of the moment her favorite hero set foot inside her house. She felt happy enough to explode like his quirk. The second both of Katsuki's feet were firmly planted in the entryway, the child latched onto the sleeve of his coat and began to tug him forwards, all boundaries of politeness totally forgotten on her part. Come on! Come on! I want to show you my secret base! And you gotta see King's dog too! Behind him, Katsuki heard his mother stifle a squeal, which he ignored in favor of raising a questioning brow at the child. At this point, he didn't quite trust himself to allow any decent words to come out of his mouth, as his previous experience in saying all the wrong things in his life was still busy rubbing his face in the muck with an imaginary round face, for some reason, stomping its head in for good measure. So for the moment he decided his best option was to say nothing until he was certain it wouldn't rebound on him. Although I'm sure I could say anything and she would spin it into a positive note. She's too much like Isuku in that manner. From down the hall, a young woman came around a wall and waved. He recognized her as the older sister, Aine. She brushed some of her short pink hair back before tossing her thumb over her shoulder. Her secret base is just the empty lot behind our house, Aine Momogami said with a shrug. You can go look if you want since dinner's not ready yet, but you also don't have to indulge her. It's not much anyways. Ayako whipped around and shot her sister a stink-eyed glare. What was she trying to do? Thwart her plans? The little girl quickly turned to Katsuki again with wide, pleading eyes. Well, it's either the base or listening to my parents gossip about me while I'm there. Katsuki mentally grumbled. Even in hindsight, the answer was an obvious one. With a shrug, he gestured for the child to lead the way. Ayako jumped around as she led him down the hall, ducking past Aine and into what appeared to be a joint living room and dining room, with the kitchen just beyond that. As they moved along, Katsuki casually observed his surroundings. The room as a whole was small, but not overly so that it felt stifling or cramped. With one medium-sized couch and a regular sitting chair surrounding and overlooking an old TV, the scene was complemented by the little wooden dining table with its slightly larger chairs. A few pictures of Ayako and Aine hung on the walls, and there was a fake tree by a corner near the kitchen. But as they traveled, Crimson eyes fell on a modest-looking stand that resembled an incomplete bookshelf. It rested in the space between the living room and dining room, next to a set of sliding glass doors, acting almost like a divider. Katsuki's breath caught in his throat. He didn't see these kinds of stands all that often, having been the kind of person that was not regularly invited to another's house, nor did his family have one set up in their own home. It was as he stared at the two picture frames resting on two small, well-tailored pillows that he remembered Aine happened to be Ayako's legal guardian. Katsuki caught the faint scent of clover coming from the bud sedan, the shrine for the dead, as he passed it on his way outside. A chill ran down his spine, and it didn't come from the evening air. Following behind at a leisurely pace, and then settling themselves into seats at the dining table instead, Mitsuki and Masaru watched as their usually bull-headed son willfully allowed the small child to drag him around until they disappeared from sight by ducking around a loose plank in the fence. To say that they were shocked was the understatement of the century. "Is he always so obliging?" Aine couldn't help but chuckle as she asked, already guessing the answer based on their thunderstruck expressions. She slid into her seat opposing the couple. Since dinner was safely cooking away in a pot, the young woman felt no qualms about having a nice chat with the Bakugo parents in the meantime. "No." Mitsuki was the first to snap out of it, rolling her eyes with a snort. "The little punk generally makes it a point to lead the way himself. He can be so mulish at times. So to say the least, this is kind of baffling." She shrugged a little helplessly and turned to her husband. "He never even told us about saving your little girl. Sure, we wondered what was going on when he showed up later than usual, but he was adamant in not telling us a thing. And lately, he seemed to have a lot on his mind." Aine absorbed the information bit by bit, only pausing in her analysis to correct one little detail. "Ayako isn't my daughter, she's my sister." She chuckled at their gobsmacked expressions. "I've been taking care of her since she was 4 though, so it almost does seem like I've taken on that role." Before Mitsuki could apologize for the mistake, Aine jutted her chin over their heads, towards the butsudan, which the couple finally took notice of. "I was a year out of high school and already moved out, so I wasn't there when it happened." Her voice went low, and her eyes softened. "But Ayako was. Our parents were bioscientists, true nerds that like to study ecosystems and the likes. They had been invited to a wildlife convention at Kobe, and because Ayako couldn't be left at home alone, they took her with them." Mitsuki and Masaru shifted in their seats, entwining their hands in each other's laps. Something nagged at them in the back of their minds, something that said they should know what was coming next, about what had happened 2 years ago, but they couldn't remember for the life of themselves. So they sat together silently and waited with a rising sense of dread for the rest of the story to be revealed. "Do you remember hearing about the earthquake that hit Kobe?" Aine asked. The couple nodded, holding onto each other a little tighter. The young woman bowed her head. "From what I was told, they were all found beneath the rubble of their hotel building, both of my parents forming a shield over Ayako. My dad." Aine choked, snapping her jaw shut with an audible click. It hurt her just to remember, and even though she had been doing fine until now, it was overwhelming to talk about it. When she'd been awoken from sleep by her roommate with every news channel blasting information and speculations about the sudden severity of nature, her world had been tilted on its axis. When the rescue teams had finally managed to unearth her family from beneath the rocks, her father had been declared dead on the spot. A broken neck had been what done him in. Her mother, though still alive but unconscious, died before they could reach the hospital. Too much internal bleeding in her brain, they had declared. But Ayako had miraculously survived. Though she had cracked the back of her skull on a rock and caused slow bleeding between the bone plating and the sac that protected the brain, she had survived. The bleeding had caused a bit of memory loss, and altered her emotional development to a certain degree, but ultimately she was saved by the fact that the bleeding had not actually been in her brain. Aine quickly rubbed at her eyes, and stood from her seat, offering a crooked smile to the worried-looking couple. "Ha, sorry for suddenly making things all gloomy." I'm just gonna go check on dinner and then I'll get you guys something to drink. Without waiting for them to respond, the young woman quickly disappeared into the kitchen. She rubbed her eyes a couple more times, the blurriness becoming more like a fine film over her eyes and if anything more irritating than not. As she checked on the sukiyaki and prepared some tea, Ayan glanced out the little window that sat above the sink, looking towards the far fence. Idly, she wondered what those two kids might possibly be up to. Katsuki observed the dump that was supposedly something akin to a secret base. The lot itself was fairly large, and filled with what almost resembled poorly plotted patches of weeds and dead ground. Trash was piled haphazardly at the far end. Broken appliances, shredded sofas, beds with the springs poking out of them. The list of items only went on the longer he stared at the mountain of garbage. There was a barren, scraggly-looking tree in the middle and an even sadder-looking shed. He supposed the only cool thing about it was that it almost resembled a fort, with large rocks stacked up indicating an entrance, and a couple turrets surrounding it. There was even one of those little orange flags, the kind that indicated conduits or cable lines were beneath them, carefully stuck on the roof. The building itself was probably only about as tall as himself. As he observed the conditions of the lot, Ayako scampered away, looking around as if she had lost something. When she didn't find whatever she was looking for outside, she ducked inside the shed. Katsuki tucked his hands into his coat pocket and waited for what felt like was an eternity. He wasn't good at waiting. Never had been, and it seemed highly unlikely that he ever would be. Just as he was about to ditch his patience and invade the little shed, Ayako popped out with something wriggling in her arms. The child grinned at him and held up a puppy, Lion King style. Aniki, say hello to King's dog. King's dog, that's Aniki. The puppy gave a loud bark as it struggled against the child's awkward grip until it managed to kick its way to the ground. It ran towards him, Katsuki to reflexively take a step backwards. The puppy clambered up his shoe. It was small enough that it could sit down comfortably on his foot, and practically howled at him. There was a mix of thoughts, well, more like images, that flooded through his mind as he glared down at the animal. Food was one of them. The memory of smells like greasy applewood bacon, for instance, bombarded his senses, and for a moment, he almost thought that someone was actually cooking some. Another was an image of himself, lying in the middle of the road curled on his side, soaking and dazed, as he looked over his shoulder. You're that damn mutt that started this whole mess, Katsuki muttered under his breath, slightly reeling from the perspective of the image. His frown deepened as he realized that the scene was viewed from the dog's eyes, and that the memory was being shared directly into his head. King's dog's got a mind quirk, Ayako jabbered unhappily while making an attempt to grab the puppy. He only got it recently, so everything he sends is just pictures, but when he gets bigger, he might actually be able to use words and stuff. Nei-chan says that that's called telepathy. Telepathy, Katsuki supplied, putting an end to her struggle even though it was amusing to watch the faces she made as she attempted to say the big word. Ayako beamed brightly and continued. Yeah. So because he's got that, I decided that he could be the lookout for my base and warn me about Quakehead and his army. King's dog does a good job too. Not a single bad guy has breached our defenses. She squatted and scratched the puppy behind his ear, to which the animal began panting and thumping its hind leg. Who the hell is Quakehead? Katsuki asked. Ayako had sounded a bit too serious for what was supposedly an imaginary villain. The little girl looked up, brushing a few strands of hair out of her eyes, and stared at him with an utterly serious expression. Katsuki shifted in place, suddenly not sure if he actually wanted the answer to this question. The weirdo she normally acted like was more tolerable than this disconcerting seriousness, to say the least. Quakehead is the bad man that's holding Ma and Pa's souls captive. The words rolled off her tongue slowly, almost as if this was the first time she were saying them out loud. And I'm the hero that's gonna set them free so they can rest in peace. It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over his head. His body froze in place, and his heart leapt into his throat, choking him. He had not been expecting such a deep answer, let alone one that would make him feel things. It hurt him. It hurt him because it was so pure and genuine, and there wasn't a damn thing about it that was selfish. It also made him think of the two pictures in the but sedan, about how this little girl used an imaginary villain to cope with their deaths, and God did it make him pity her. For once, he felt an urge to comfort, though he didn't understand how to, and more than anything he was confused as to just how to deal with these emotions. Ayako looked down again, twiddling with her fingers. Hey Aniki, I've been meaning to ask you, but, would you be my second-in-command against Quakehead? Her pudgy cheeks reddened considerably, and she snuck shy glances at him from between the curtain of her pink bangs. She really wanted Katsuki to join her team. He was strong, and fearless, and undeniably cool. With him, the future #1 hero, on her side, Quakehead wouldn't stand a chance. But she was also nervous because this was the first time she had ever admitted who Quakehead was. Not even Karazu and you knew. What if he said no? What if he told her she was just being a dumb little kid and to quit making things up? There were just as many bad scenarios as there were good, and even she knew that not everything could go her way. What do I have to do as second in command? Head shooting up, amber eyes widened ever so slightly. Katsuki looked off to the side, carefully keeping his eyes trained on a patch of dirt. A part of him screamed at him that this was incredibly stupid, that this kid needed to grow up and face reality with its real villains, that he shouldn't agree to be second to anything or anyone. But another part of him, violently, shut those thoughts down with the simple understanding that this was just another part of becoming the #1. And as the #1, he had to fight the villains to protect the civilians, no matter how real or imaginary they may be. Besides, All Might probably did it all the time and nobody's taken his title since he showed up. You get to command our army and help defeat Quakehead, Ayako declared enthusiastically. She quickly looked around before grabbing the sleeve of his coat and tugged on it. But whenever you're outside, you have to be super duper careful because Quakehead's spies are everywhere always watching. That's why I usually have an umbrella, but I forgot to grab it before leaving. Hurry, to the base. The child began to drag him towards the dilapidated shed before abruptly stopping. He nearly tripped over her. Oh yeah, Ayako said, as if a light bulb had just gone off in her head. What's your hero alias? Katsuki blinked. He'd thought about a hero alias before, but it was also something that he didn't exactly think about either. There were a few options he toyed around with, but he couldn't decide which he liked best, and he also knew that if he ever revealed them, then he'd meet a ton of resistance. Still, Ayako had asked, and he needed to give her something. The young man grinned sharply, though he still couldn't help but feel apprehensive. I'm King Explosion Murder. Ayako thought about it for a second before nodding her head in satisfaction. That is a strong name. Even Quakehead will shake when he hears it. But it's pretty long. Do you mind if I just call you King? He was beginning to think that he shouldn't be shocked by the things that came out of her mouth anymore, but it didn't stop the feeling from flooding him anyways. Even if she had shortened the alias down, she hadn't dismissed it by saying that it was too scary or villainous to be a hero alias. His grin became a little more smug, and he said, Whatever floats your boat, Red Shoe. Ayako smiled back at him. And then they were both running towards the little shed in an attempt to beat Quakehead's prying eyes. I let you go outside for a little bit, and this is how you come back? Ayin shook her head with a click of her tongue. What on earth were you two even doing? Scavenging in a dumpster? The two in question studied the ground with the intent to look uninterested and definitely not guilty. They were covered in dirt from head to toe, and there were stray pieces of the weeds from the empty lot tangled in Ayako's hair. If one were to actually look hard enough, they would find exactly the same thing in Katsuki's as well. The little girl rubbed her cheek as if she were just wiping away a little dirt smudge, as if that would make a difference and appease her sister. It, in fact, did no such thing. Well, explain yourself. Ayako snuck a glance at Katsuki, whom honestly didn't give a fuck and was also ignoring the silent accusations coming from his parents. He peeked at her from the corner of his eye, and in a split second, they seemed to connect all over again. Their time at the secret base hadn't been long, but Ayako knew that her hero had had fun fighting against her villain, and had even seemed to relax from whatever worry he'd been carrying with him all night. She wouldn't ever regret getting dirty for that. Did you hear? Apparently there was an attack on the USJ while a class was being held. No one seems to have been seriously hurt except some teachers and one student, I think, but those poor first years. Those were the words that Ayako had heard on accident. While she was on her way back from the bathroom in school, she'd passed the staff lounge and overheard a couple teachers talking gossiping, as her sister would say. At first, it hadn't meant anything to her, but then she began to think it through. USJ. The Unforeseen Simulations Joint, not Universal Studios Japan, she thought was a place where heroes in training learn how to rescue people from nature's tantrums, as Nei-chan had once explained. But according to the teachers, this place had been attacked by bad guys and someone had gotten hurt. And suddenly it had meant a lot to her. Those were also the words that wouldn't stop ringing in her ears, even long after she had heard them. It bothered Ayako much the same as hearing thunder rumbling in the dead of night. Whenever thunder broke the world with its cacophonic booming, the little girl believed something terrible would come with it. Those words were thunder, and they leaked her fears into her imagination like the rain that would follow after. She wanted to believe with all her heart that Anarchy was alright, that it wasn't his class that had been at the USJ today, that he wasn't the one who had been hurt. But bad scene after bad scene wriggled in her mind like a can of worms. What if Anarchy had broken all the bones in his body or suffered through sharp objects stabbing through his stomach and chest? What if the building had collapsed? What if Anarchy had gotten trapped under the rocks or had hit his head? What if Quayhead had been the one to attack, knowing it was better to do so while the general was separated from the leader? What if he had tried to take away Anarchy too? To trap him away like he did her parents? Ayako shook her head and then looked up to meet her sister's stern gaze, the woman's eyes constantly reminding her of burned honey. And all she said was, "Quakehead." Ayin squinted at the little girl suspiciously before turning to the boy, hoping he'd at least give a better explanation for their state, even if it was half-assed. Katsuki paid her no heed as he just shrugged and repeated the little girl. "Quakehead." For a split second, a teeth-baring smile cracked across his face, as if he had just found something extremely amusing, but it disappeared just as quickly and Ayin couldn't be sure if she had seen it or not. Ayako giggled and pushed her way inside to go wash up. The spiky-haired boy followed close behind, only briefly pausing to glance once more at the small shrine. With a small dip of his head, he made a promise to his future. "I will become a better hero. For this kid, and for myself." But before he could so much as take another step further, Mitsuki jumped him, pinching his cheeks tightly and screeching like a bat from hell in his face. "Who are you and what have you done with my son?" Whatever air of tranquility Katsuki had been under died as he snapped back in retaliation. "What the fuck? Get off me, you damn hag! Don't you talk to me that way, you little punk, or I'll kick your ass from one end of Japan and back again. That's as far as you can go. Ha! I'll blast you cloud high before you can even fucking try. Hell, I might as well train my aiming skills as I shoot you to the moon." As mother and son continued to bicker, the latter having gotten out of the woman's grasp and beginning to perform an extremely awkward dance of defense, Ayin was faced with a rising conflict ion. On one hand, she had been beginning to think that perhaps the boy wasn't so bad after all. He seemed to be able to maintain some semblance of calm around Ayako, and he willingly went along with the odd things that she did, and his parents weren't horrible people either. But on the other hand, she cringed as Mitsuki landed a powerful blow on the back of the boy's head, and then quickly trapped him in a headlock. "These people are insane." Masaru sidled closer and gave her a sympathetic smile. "It's a weird way of showing it, but they really do love each other. They never actually mean each other harm." Ayin could beg to differ on that just by watching the two interact. Yet, upon looking closer, she could see that there was a lot of self-control on both parties' parts. Even if it looked like they were going overboard, they were still mindful enough to not do any lasting damage to the other. Especially as Katsuki had trained to hit things a lot harder. It was strange, certainly, but if he can control himself like this around his mother, then he must really love her. Ayin concluded. Perhaps he really is a good guy. There was still something about the young man that made her uncomfortable, though that might have just been his foul mouth. At this point Ayin couldn't help but silently grant the boy a passing grade. Now she could only wait for time to tell if he was actually worth it. Once he got free and clean, Katsuki remembered to text Isuku. On the minuscule chance that Quakehead was a real but misnamed villain, he would do his absolute best to hunt down the bastard. "Send me intel on any still active or captured villain who can use quirks that can cause earthquakes directly or indirectly." Laughter, loud and raucous, erupted from the three adults that had chosen to remain seated at the table instead of moving for the more comfortable seats in the living room. They sounded more like old friends catching up after some time apart, casually sipping their coffee while trading wild stories that each of their families had endured. This particular round was one Katsuki did his hardest to ignore, not particularly thrilled with the fact that his mother felt the need to embarrass him by sharing something cringe-worthy from his childhood with a stranger. Altogether, it proved to be easier said than done. His mother had a particularly annoying and ugly laugh. It reminded him too much of a hyena. "Can't that hag find something to talk about that doesn't involve me?" Katsuki wondered sullenly as he watched Ayako go through a reenactment of one of her dramatic battles against her imaginary villain. The little girl dropped to the ground and began rolling, throwing her hand out to release invisible orbs at the enemy. Earlier, when he had asked, she had somewhat explained the concept of a machine that ejected balls with different purposes, saying it was modeled after some retro hero called Honey Lemon. Since the little girl had no idea what kind of quirk she would get, or what she would even like to have, there were too many cool quirks after all, then the made-up gadget was her default for the time being. Ayako jumped up and raced around the couch. He craned his head around and watched as she held up her hand again, bracing it with the other as she yelled, "Freeze, villain!" There came the high-pitched pew, pew, pews as she fired her weapon before charging out of the room with indignant cries, seemingly having already forgotten that this was just a replay of a previous episode as she had referred to it. And apparently she had forgotten about him too. She's such a ditz. Katsuki scoffed to himself, folding his arms over his chest, and leaned back to rest on the couch to wait until either his parents decided to leave or Ayako came back. The second option struck him as having a better chance of winning. "What a lively kid!" Mitsuki chortled. "She must have an equally energetic quirk to match that hyper-personality of hers. Heaven knows that Katsuki's personality ended up matching his quirk." Said boy pretended not to notice the pointed stare drilling holes through the back of his head, though he did grit his teeth at the dryness of her remark. No, it's all 100% energy of a 6-year-old. Ayako doesn't have a quirk." Ain hesitated, almost as if she were going at a yet at the end of that sentence, but something held her back. Katsuki cocked his head to the side, interested yet apprehensive as to where this conversation might lead. "Well, there's still time, I'm sure, unless you've already taken her to a quirk doctor," Masaru said, more in thought than anything else, though when he realized his mistake, he quickly jumped to correct it. "Sorry, I don't mean to pry." No doubt Ain was waving it off, and she gave a mildly embarrassed huff. "I've been waiting for her results, but I can give a fairly good educated guess for myself on what the results would be. So," the woman sighed, "I just want to let her enjoy imagining the possibilities to be a kid that still sees it as an attainable dream to be like the superheroes she admires so much before the reality of it sets in." There was shifting, and then his mother was trying to lift the heavy atmosphere with a little bit of good-natured hope. "Genetics are a weird thing, so I wouldn't just automatically assume, yeah? My friend Inko has a son who was Katsuki's friend from childhood, always a late bloomer to everything it seems, but he got his quirk just before entering high school, even after being deemed quirkless. You never know, your little sister might be the same." Katsuki clenched his teeth, a slight twitch developing in his eye. There was still a sharp sting where it concerned that little detail. He wanted to whip around in his seat and start cussing both of them out of reflex, Izuku Midoriya and his mother, but he held his tongue, slowly but finally edging into a disgruntled point of acknowledgement in the usefulness of the act. "To be honest," Ain spoke up again, much more quietly, after allowing for a moment of thoughtful silence. "After we get her arm checked out, this is gonna sound awful of me, and hypocritical, but I'm really hoping she'll turn out to be quirkless." "What?" "As much as I would like to support Ayako's dream of becoming a hero, I also find myself wanting to keep her away from such a career. Being a hero's not all that it's cracked up to be. It's a dangerous way of living no matter which field you go into, quirk or no. And I just can't guarantee or even trust that she'll be able to handle anything when the time comes for her to start making major decisions. All she sees is the flash. I see both the flash and the crash." Katsuki couldn't believe he was hearing such utter bullshit. Being a hero isn't all that it's cracked up to be? Yeah, that much was obvious to anyone that even bothered to pay so much as half a cent of attention to the aftermath of any kind of battle, and it was an understandable concern, but seriously? As a general rule, most people knew what they were getting into the moment they decided they were going to try and go pro. They accepted the fact that there would be danger and chose to endure so that everyone else could be safe. What exactly did she expect the job of a hero to consist of sunshine, lollipops, and fucking daisies? Give him a goddamn break. And was this woman really chucking her sister's dreams under the bus by going so far as to say she couldn't even trust Ayako in the future? What in the actual fuck? He may not have had much room to be judging, as he ended up being far worse in regards to Izuku, but he couldn't stop himself from violently rejecting Ain's argument in this moment simply because of how wrong it was. Especially after all that drivel she had said about wanting to let Ayako enjoy imagining a future as a hero. A flicker of movement caught his eye, breaking his intense inner dissection of the many flaws in Ain's argument. He looked up at the doorway that led to the main hall just as Ayako ducked back around it. She had only been there for a second, so it was difficult to tell, but he could have sworn he saw something akin to tears on her little face. Katsuki ground his teeth and stood up, unfolding his arms to forcefully shove his hands into his pockets. He didn't bother to turn around as he addressed the group behind him, sharpening his words specifically for the young woman, while walking towards the hallway. Shut the fuck up. You're thinking too deeply about an unknown future. Don't say shit based on how things are now and expect them to never change, especially without giving her a chance to prove her own potential and capability. Katsuki chided as he caught their attention. Besides, Isuku suffered 11 long years before he got his quirk, and if he were here to hear you wish that on your own sister, even that shitty nerd would punch you in the mouth regardless of how nice he is. As soon as the words left his mouth, his entire childhood, even up through middle school, with Isuku flashed through his mind and the heavy cloud struck him hard in the chest again. Katsuki didn't let the guilt show, though, merely proceeding to block out his own accusing thoughts, and the apologies his parents were serving to Aine as he rounded the corner. Ayako jumped the second he entered the hall, her amber eyes widening as she craned her neck back to stare up at him. Instead of seeing pain or dejection from hearing her sister's words, he found that there was a weight of resigned understanding blanketed over the child. She knew being quirkless was a permanent possibility, and a part of her showed her fears like darkness between splintering cracks. But the most important thing he saw was the echo of the light that never went out in Izuku's eyes. That tiny core of heat that, no matter what, kept on burning through everything that tried to smother it. And that, to him, was admirably brave. Even when he still referred to Izuku as Deku, he had still been the only non-extra of Aldera. The only one who challenged him. Katsuki studied her for a little longer before slipping a hand out of his pocket, and very hesitantly, reached out to pat her curly little head. She dipped her head in compliance, so very used to the action itself, but peeked up again as soon as he stopped, revealing tear marks. It's not fair. Loads of people used to do dangerous stuff before quirks came around. So why? Ayako hiccuped, her voice pitching higher as she hurried to wipe away a few escaping tears. So why can't I be a hero too? Katsuki inhaled sharply, the air catching in his throat. Part of him knew that the reason why was because, as a given, the 20% of the population that was born without a quirk was weaker than the rest who were born with quirks, a minority. And as a minority, they were not given nearly the same amount of equal opportunity to thrive along with the rest of society. Certainly, there were jobs that were still technically considered hero jobs that quirkless people could apply for, but there wasn't entirely much merit to it when everything was overshadowed by the pro-heroes anyways. That was just the way the world turned. Or at least, that was how he used to view it. To his surprise, Katsuki found the other part of himself silently demanding the answers to that very question along with Ayako. Why couldn't she be a hero? Just because she didn't have a quirk didn't mean it ruled out her potential. Potential, if given the time to be worked with and molded properly, could give way to skill. Skill could wind up being what wound up being the most important deciding factor in any given situation. In the end, it all gave way to credible capability, the trust of many, and the right to claim. I did it. To all who said I couldn't, I did. And if he were to be completely honest with himself every time he looked into her eyes, he saw a kind of potential that only Isuku could match, though he wasn't sure he could properly explain it even if he wanted to. How often do you work out? Katsuki finally asked. I mean exercise at least. You know that I do, and my quirk definitely doesn't give me my muscles. I never? Ayako had a poor confused look on her face. I mean, Nachan says I like running about a lot. Alright, I'll count that. You're too young for the real deal anyways. Katsuki acquiesced. You been hitting the books? Yes. Do you know how to throw a punch? No. You've got to be able to meet all those requirements. Nothing good comes from dreaming and complaining about what shitty luck you got. Katsuki huffed. If you can do all that, then be better. Be faster. Be stronger. Be smarter. Because if you can do all that, you can. Eh? Ayako was startled. You can be a hero, Katsuki clarified, turning his head to clear his throat. And you already are, sort of. Even if you're quirkless, you've already saved King's dog. Not everyone can do that, you know. As for the ones that say otherwise, then they can just fuck off. It wasn't his most eloquent delivery considering he was not one for comforting others, but she could get the message, right? This is fine, right? I can't make the same mistakes as I did with Isuku. The two looked at each other, a deep crimson that somehow appeared lighter and calmer than it ever had, and an amber that was splashed with hazel patterns, teary but bright and hopeful. Ayako gave a wide, toothy smile while using the back of her hand again to wipe her face. Katsuki rolled his eyes, his nose wrinkling. Blindly, he reached for his bag, pulling it into his lap to look for a disposable napkin. He never kept them on himself, considering it too much of a hassle as well as unnecessary since he hardly ever needed them anyways. "Gross, use a napkin," he said as he handed her the said toiletry. The child giggled while taking it and blew her nose. By the time she was done, Katsuki had made another surprising decision. "What's your alias?" "Eh? If I'm gonna be the #1 hero, I'm gonna need the #1 sidekick's alias," Red Shoe. Humming to herself, the little girl tilted from side to side. She felt loads better after talking with Aniki. Nothing good comes from dreaming and complaining about what shitty luck you got. If you can do all that, then be better. Be faster. Be stronger. Be smarter. Because if you can do all that, you can. You can be a hero. I can. She mumbled to herself with a giddy little smile. I can. Why? Because I'm gonna be Valkyrie. Valkyrie. Katsuki mulled the alias over. Not bad. Not bad at all, Red Shoe. Valkyrie and King, explosion murder, crime fighter supreme. Watch out, Quakehead. We're coming at you stronger than ever. Chapter 15, Meetings 3, The Investigation. The police have investigated the group calling themselves League of Villains, and there does not appear to be anyone registered with a quirk that lets them copy the appearance of a fictional Clint or symbiote. Nor is there anyone with a slime-related quirk around teenagerhood. Naomasa Tsukachi read off his papers, making sure he didn't miss a piece of information as he reported to the staff of UA in the meeting room. It's the same with the villain called Kurojiri with Warp Gate. They are probably not citizens and are probably experienced villains using false names. Basically, we don't know anything. Vlad King, aka Sekijiro-kan, muttered. Each of the staff members combed through their own piles of sheets, scanning them for more details. Since none of them were really there for a majority of the action, they only had brief moments of videotapes, the little info they could get out of the captured villains, and the statements of the students themselves. Snipe dropped his papers onto the conference table. I reckon we ought to learn fast, or the leader of these varmints, Anarchy, decides to have another go. What a pain. Leader, huh? Tashinori Yagi, aka All Might, repeated. Well, from what I can tell, that's very likely. What is it, All Might? Nisa turned to him. It was an incredibly bold attack that normal people wouldn't carry out even if they thought of it, Tashinori explained. Even though she didn't win, Anarchy showed the demeanor of one who accepted a loss while having the unassailable drive to win at all costs. Frankly, the only times she lost composure were the times she saw me defeat their weapon or when she recognized Bakugo Shounen and Midoriya Shounen. Recognized? Midnight, aka Namuri Kayama's eyes widened. She knew them? Apparently, Tsukachi replied. According to Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo's testimonies, she referred to them through their middle school nicknames, suggesting that she's a former acquaintance of theirs. However, due to the fact that they rarely called each other anything but those names, it's possible that she just knew them passively. There's also the fact that the students were unable to decipher her true identity, or remember anyone with a quirk similar to hers. And I know enough of Midoriya Shounen to believe that he would never forget a quirk. Tashinori sighed. Nisa clapped his paws together to gather the others' attention. I think it's time for a tea break. Tashinori gave his superior a questioning look. Sir? The answers are not going to drop into our laps just because we want them to, and sometimes a quick tea break allows one to take a step back and look at the issue from a different angle. He quickly checked his watch, taking note of the time. Besides, we might as well take a break while we can. After all, after this meeting we have much more to discuss. Nisa patted the stack of folders sitting beside him, and within it were the potential plans for hosting their next school event. Tsukachi offered a friendly smile. Very well, Principal. With that, the other teachers took their leave. They either made their way to the break room where Nisa would prepare them some tea, or they moved outside for some much-needed fresh air. Are you serious about this, Tashinori? Tsukachi questioned as they looked through a large stack of papers in one of UA's staff rooms. The whole point of investigations is to calmly gather facts. Due to Anarchy's implied connection to Izuku, Tashinori had called Tsukachi to bring in all the evidence he had gathered in his spare time those few days ago, when he called. It had been a bit jarring when he had briefly mistaken Izuku as a repentant delinquent, then it became worse than inconsistencies started popping up. What are you implying, Naomasa-kun? Tashinori's true form lightly released steam as he glared down at the reports which detailed what he knew were lies about Izuku's conduct in his middle school. Are you saying that I won't be able to stay calm in front of Midoriya Shounen's tormentors? Yes. Tsukochi knew well he would have to be blunt as possible to the passionate man that was the symbol of peace. I don't believe these lies either. In fact, this is just future evidence for falsification of documents and quirk discrimination charges. But if we want to catch these monsters, we need to be cool. Cool? Toshinori breathed as he calmed down a bit. Cool how? Heroes like you are passionate, like blazing stars which shine on the darkness and burn away evil. Tsukochi clarified. What I need at my side is a cool detective, like a cool scalpel which cut out evil. If you're coming with me to Aldera, I'm going to need you to be a detective, not a hero. Can you do that? Toshinori silently fumed as he once more looked over the 260 reports detailing Aldera's misdeeds to Isuku. 83 reports of tardiness, in which he rarely went over a minute. The one time he was late by over an hour, Katsuki Bakugo was mentioned to have dragged him back home after screaming, "What's your sick ass doing out of bed?" 23 of 47 reports of alleged bullying had timestamps that coincided with the times he was too late. 11 of 32 reports of dress code violations also coincided with the tardiness reports, except that while it was possible, Izuku of UA was well known to be a well-behaved but constantly nervous boy who wouldn't have had the initiative to dress differently than described. Plus, most of the reports were stamped in during or after the lunch periods, which would coincide with the bullying reports. Tsukochi had known something was really up the moment he read that an accused bully was constantly mentioned to be the one having his clothes damaged. Plus, not a single name of his victims had been mentioned. What about destruction of school property? Is that real or false? Tsukochi asked, wanting to cover all the potential misconceptions. I can't imagine that's true either. Midoriya Shounen was a twig before UA. Toshinori smiled fondly as he brought out his phone to show a picture of pre-training Izuku Midoriya on his hands and knees while despair visibly clouded his form. Rather than him destroying property, the property would have destroyed him. So what is your conclusion now that we went through all of that? Tsukochi asked, curious if Toshinori had come to the same horrible ones he had. I don't want to say this lightly, but the impression I get from all of this, Toshinori gestured to the paperwork, is that Aldera Junior High actively tried to sabotage Midoriya Shounen. If he were any other student, this would have destroyed his future. Exactly. Tsukochi frowned as he looked up Aldera Junior High's website. I've never seen quirk discrimination this concentrated before. An entire school ganging up on one unfortunate student just for his quirklessness. I'm glad that he came out okay, but how did Midoriya-kun go through the whole thing without losing? He didn't finish it, but Toshinori understood. The desperate plea he'd been asked off on that roof. The utterly depressed demeanor after he answered. Just how had he not thrown himself off that roof? Seriously, what had All Might been thinking leaving him up there? He's courageous. At Tsukochi's confusion, Toshinori continued. Midoriya Shounen is a courageous boy. It takes immense spirit to live and be defiant in a society in which hates you for no good reason. To see that he faced all this and came out the way he did only makes me gladder that I had met him. Even without, one for all, binding us together, I don't think I could have strayed far from a boy who was constantly told that he couldn't become a hero then went on to become so regardless. Tsukochi smiled in agreement. You know, Sansa just mentioned the multiverse theory to me a while back. Maybe he could have joined me in detective work if being a pro-hero didn't work out. Detective Midoriya, huh? Toshinori cracked a grin as he envisioned it. I can actually see Midoriya Shounen pulling it off. Now then, how can I convince Principal Niza to give me the day off so that I can join you? A message is here. Tsukochi blinked as Toshinori's phone lit up and vibrated with a message of Niza. Granted. Was he watching us through a hidden camera or something? Don't think too much on it. It'll be better for you in the long run. Tsukochi nervously smiled as he eyed what he believed was an invisible camera at the top right corner of the window. Niza-sen hasn't taken down any official government institutions lately, and is probably just getting excited. If you happen to be suggesting an investigation where we just have to investigate our students' origins due to concerns of a villain knowing of them in a personal manner, then of course Aldera Junior High would make such a lovely starting point. I feel like I've just learned something I'm allowed to know but not supposed to speak of. You're his most recent employee. You were going to find out sooner or later. Tsukochi looked at the letter in his hand again as Toshinori drove to the school. It was a heavy, high-quality piece of paper with UA's logo adorning the top right corner. Full authority to act on behalf of UA High School and by extension the Hero Public Safety Commission as well as the Muzurufu Police Department in matters concerning the following. Aldera Junior High. Katsuki Bakugo, student of UA High School, Hero Department, Class 1A. Izuku Midoriya, student of UA High School, Hero Department, Class 1A. Is hereby granted to Tashinori Yagi, Head Secretary and Personal Assistant to Nizu, Principal of UA High School. Naomasa Tsukachi, Detective of the Mizurufu Police Department. For the duration of their investigation or until the end of term. The text was followed by a formal greeting, a squiggly signature from some HPSC employee, the rigid signature of the chief superintendent, and Nizu's own little doodle of a rat as well as his paw print. Tsukachi shuddered. Something like this should have taken more than just an hour to procure it. Once again, Principal Nizu's reach terrifies and surprises me. Weren't you the one who told me to get used to Nizu being omniscient? Tashinori replied with a grin before it faded away. Also, we're almost there. Tsukachi fell into a practiced calm as they pulled into the school's parking lot. A quick look around showed that the school had definitely seen better days as cracks and moss randomly lined its outer walls. Okay. Be cool like the scalpel. Be cool like the scalpel. Tashinori muttered as they walked into the school's foyer. Biku, is that kid just casually breathing fire over there? Tsukachi looked at the direction that Tashinori had indicated. Indeed, there was a student breathing flames as he spat upwards twice before climbing into the school through one of its ground floor windows. The two just kept staring at the surreal sight until Tsukachi regained his wits and guided Tashinori on the way in. A thick, stuffy atmosphere greeted them, making both of them wrinkle their noses and recoil for a second. The foyer looked as old as the school looked on the outside. Through a pane of glass, they saw a woman working on her computer, in a small receptionist's office to the left of the entrance. Neither the hero nor the detective approached her for the moment, both aware of the power of gathering information before engaging. Instead, they started carefully surveying their surroundings and listened to the silence filling the foyer. Tashinori took a silent step towards a wall where a fire escape plan with a map of the building was hung and studied it. Considering the information Nizu dug up about the school might be incomplete, it was a reasonable move to check for differences. While his friend was doing that, Tsukachi noticed the sheer damage the walls had suffered to age. There were far more cracks indoors than outdoors, which, when coupled for the safety he wished for the students here, made Tsukachi's insides twist painfully. Regardless of what the outcome of their visit will be, he would be doing something about this. Makoto would definitely hound me if I didn't. Tsukachi caught Tashinori's eye before clearing his throat to get the attention of the receptionist. She looked up from her work for a second, ready to return to it the next, but caught herself and did a double-take looking at the visitors who have now stepped up to the counter in front of her desk. Her face fell for a moment before she remembered her role and donned a plastic grin straight from the injection molding machine. You must be Tsukachi-san and Yagi-san. My name is Manatsuchiya. Welcome to Aldera Junior High. I'm afraid Principal Okiai isn't available just yet, you are quite a bit early, she said, looking at Tashinori and him only. Tashinori, who looked nowhere near as friendly as usual and was currently taking full advantage of his disturbing visage. It seemed that the constant reciting of the "be cool like a scalpel" mantra plus the utter disdain for most of the staff in Aldera had allowed Tashinori to create a cold persona totally unlike his original one. It wasn't exactly what Tsukachi wanted, but if it worked. Tsukachi smiled towards the receptionist. It's alright. We might as well get to know the school a bit more while we wait. She shot a nervous glance in Tsukachi's direction, but eventually turned to Tashinori again, trying to coax a smile out of him by doing the same. She failed woefully. Should I notify his secretary of your early arrival then? No, we're fine. Don't worry, Tsukachi replied, taking back her attention. No need to hurry, I'm sure he's got plenty to do as a principal of an establishment such as this. We were hoping we could speak to some teachers around here in the meantime, though. Starting with your counselor or nurse, maybe? Tsukachi could practically see the hesitation sneak up onto Tsuchiya's face, slowly turning her features into a frown that she desperately tried, and failed, to hide. The woman gulped. I suppose we can do that. Would you follow me, please? She glanced at Tashinori again, still feeling very intimidated. Gathering her courage, she finally turned around and began walking. They traversed halls and passing classrooms for several more minutes, taking note of rooms, windows, stairs, smell, and sound. Interestingly, Tashinori noted that the hallways weren't as quiet as the foyer that greeted them when they arrived. Though with classes in session and them very much not being run by one very strict Shoda Aizawa, this would probably be close to normal school volume. They reached the nurse's office a short while later, and the receptionist knocked on the door. Yukimura-san? You have 2 visitors. From, Yue High School. The receptionist opened the door and ushered them into a room similar to Recovery Girls, except with only 2 beds as opposed to Recovery Girls' 6. A petite woman swung about in her seat, idly humming along to some funk music as she waved peppily at the visitors. Hello? I'm Aguri Yukimura. It's a pleasure to meet you. The nurse greeted peppily as the receptionist left. The woman had short brown hair and was dressed in a lab coat which was buttoned up over her slim body. Good afternoon. I am Detective Naomasa Tsukachi. Tsukachi and Tashinori took seats offered to them after Yukimura assured them that there were no students present. This is my associate, Tashinori Yagi. My quirk is touch-based, so I won't shake hands, if that's fine with you. I'm sure the police wouldn't appreciate me affecting their comrades, she stated apologetically to Tsukachi's offered handshake. Truth. Tsukachi smiled back in response, pulling his hand back. Thank you for your honesty, Yukimura-san. It's no problem, but I wasn't expecting visitors from the police at all in the first place. Yukimura shrugged. So what can I do for you today? We're here to speak to you regarding a matter of Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo of UA, Tashinori stated, carefully observing her reactions. To their surprise, Yukimura beamed at the sound of Izuku's name. Midoriya-kun! Such a great kid! Yukimura praised honestly, astounding and relieving Tsukachi and Tashinori that there was at least one important adult who saw Izuku in a positive light. Is he doing great in UA? He's doing splendid, Tashinori replied enthusiastically, pleased at her supportive demeanor. Were you close to Midoriya Shounen? Ah, yes. Yukimura tapped her cheek nervously as her cheer died a bit. He often hid in my office to avoid his bullies and treat his wounds. But I'm glad that he got into UA. They have a strict anti-bully policy, so I'm sure he's fine. Truth. All schools have strict anti-bully policies, Tsukachi pointed out. UA is one of the few I've seen properly enforce it. Yukimura refuted, unknowingly solidifying herself as an ally to the 2 before her. How was your time with Midoriya Shounen and Bakugo Shounen? Tashinori questioned. While Bakugo-kun only came here a total of 4 times, Midoriya-kun was a misfortunate regular. Yukimura smiled as she reminisced. However, he was such a joy to be with. Always bright like the warm sun. He did have an amazing fascination for quirks. Even helped in upgrading mine. Really? Tsukachi raised an eyebrow. Yup. Yukimura nodded. My quirk is fall negation. It lets anyone I touch, including myself, with all 5 fingers become unable to fall for 5 whole hours. At first I thought it was just good for making me excellent at keeping my balance. But one session with Midoriya-kun made me realize that my quirk also affects abstract concepts. I'd had a drink and the amount never falls in amount for 5 hours. I'd had a desk and not even acid can make it fall in durability, and when I accidentally cut myself after I already used my quirk on myself, the knife bent in my hand since my quirk wouldn't let my health or blood amount fall. Truth. Oh my god! Tashinori and Tsukachi thought in sync as they exchanged glances. Izuku Midoriya had used his quirk analysis skill to turn what had been a mediocre quirk into what could be one of the most powerful types in existence. Thank God no villain ever found him, Tashinori thought as his expression paled. I had an inkling since I read that notebook of his, but it's overwhelming to see the results of his genius actually being applied on a person. This just makes things worse. Tsukachi grimaced. If Anarchy is a similar result to Yukimura-san as a person whose seemingly weak quirk was given a Midoriya upgrade, it would explain her pleasantness for him. In that case, Midoriya-kun has a villain being grateful or appreciative towards him. Which probably explains Anarchy's pleasant attitude and her suggestion to kidnap him right there. Thank you for your support towards Midoriya-kun, Tsukachi stated. Our matter actually involves him and Bakugo-kun heavily. In the recent USJ attack, Midoriya-kun was recognized by a villainess with a slime-like quirk. Was there any student with similarities to that? Yukimura hummed as she crossed both her arms and legs in confusion. No. I don't know anyone like that. You should probably ask his homeroom teacher, Iya Murakami. He should be in the schoolyard right about now. Truth. I see. Thank you for your time, Yukimura-san. Tsukachi stood up along with Tashinori to leave. We'll be on our way now. Tashinori almost made it to the door before turning about to ask Yukimura an important question. Yukimura-san, I'd like to ask one final question. Do you believe that a person without a quirk can become a hero? Yukimura blinked at the question in surprise before answering. Of course they can. I don't know why so many people seem to have forgotten that humans could do amazing things without the existence of quirks. After all, Isuku has already saved people without even getting into UA. Truth. Whilst Kochi sighed in fond exasperation as Yukimura had correctly guessed who had been referred to, Toshinori beamed as he remembered the boy who, despite just having his dream crushed by his idol, still rushed forward to save a life in distress. Yes. Yes, he has. The two nodded their goodbyes and departed, entering the hallway as they made their way towards the field. She seems nice, Toshinori muttered as classes started to empty out around them. I guess I can see her as one of Midoriya Shonen's support pillars in his time here. Tsukachi nodded in agreement. However, that bullying part worries me. We should find a way to determine if there were a few constant bullies or if it was just everyone. The men grimaced as they made their way down a flight of stairs, passing several more waves of children who were in the process of changing classrooms in between lessons, and finally exited the building into a schoolyard. It's not long after that voices drifted towards them over the yard. They rounded a corner and found a blond man standing there together with 7 students in sports uniforms. The man himself was unremarkable, wearing a simple dress shirt and sweater vest, and had his hair combed back. But what he was saying was anything but normal. Musujime, how in the world did you manage to get worse since last week? They watched as Yuya Murakami shook his head in disbelief and gestured for his student to repeat whatever he had been doing. One of the kids, a girl with long dark red hair tied into 2 low ponytails, pointed her hand at a stool which vanished before reappearing and partially merging with a stool over 4 meters away. The girl groaned as the merged stools fell over. You won't even make it to sidekick like this, let alone work for someone like Endeavor or All Might. Unbelievable. Toshinori cleared his throat. I'd prefer if you wouldn't use All Might's name as a means to discourage your students, Murakami-san. The man startled and then squinted, blinded by the sun behind them. And you are? Naomasa Tsukachi, detective of the Mizudafu Police Department. Tsukachi took off his hat in greeting. This is my associate, Toshinori Yagi. He is the head secretary of UA High School. We are here to investigate Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo's lives here due to a villain showing familiarity with during the USJ attack. We would hate to interrupt your class, so please tell us everything you can about your former students afterwards. Tsukachi raised an eyebrow as Murakami split between being unsettled by the policeman's presence and being excited Toshinori's presence. Of course, he couldn't strut over to Toshinori as the hero had slipped back into his cold persona. Oh, what a nice surprise. I didn't know you'd be, watching. Truth. We initially didn't plan to interrupt your lesson, Tsukachi stated. But my associate here couldn't just stand to hear you invoke All Might's name while chastising your student. Of course. I was in the middle of demoralizing your students. Yes, we noticed, Toshinori said coolly and clenched his fists behind his back. It seems that we've finally run into one of the bad ones. Murakami glanced back and forth between the scowling, brightly colored scarecrow and the barely smiling detective dressed in a trench coat. The coward eventually went back to his students without another word and instructed the teleport kid in much the same useless way as before. Of course, it didn't help. Of course, Musujime failed again. Whenever she tried to teleport something, her face scrunched up, trying to concentrate while her teacher kept giving unhelpful advice. How about you try to give actual advice instead of just downplaying their efforts? Toshinori asked with his voice raised just enough so it carried over to the teacher and his students. He shook his head and then turned to the kid they observed at the beginning. Musujime Shoujo, I believe? The kid nodded when she realized she was being addressed. It seems that the objects you keep teleporting tend to run the risk of telefragging. Might I suggest teleporting along a small pocket of the air surrounding with them, so that whatever you teleport will be cushioned by the compressed air? Musujime furrowed her brows and fell into contemplative silence. Her next attempt went significantly better as her stool reappeared over the landing area, nearly blasting the other stool away as it was slightly held up by the compressed air surrounding it. Musujime blinked at her surprising success before grinning broadly and waving at Toshinori in gratitude. Murakami, on the other hand, had pressed his mouth into a thin line and was wringing his hands. One of the girls, small with long black hair, round black eyes and a swishing monkey tail, came up to them with her face scrunched in frustration. You're a hero, right? Like all of UA's staff? She asked and didn't even leave room for an answer before continuing with a finger pointed at the man. Fight me! Toshinori spluttered for a second before regaining his composure and staring at her with raised eyebrows. Why would I fight you? He doesn't know what he's talking about half the time, she said and callously gestured toward her teacher. But you do, don't you? I want to learn. So fight me. Tsukachi frowned. I don't believe that to be a wise dash. Sure. Tsukachi's head snapped up to Toshinori, eyes wide. But the man paid him no mind. He was too busy trying to keep his mouth from smiling at the girl. What's your name? Lucy Sangaku. Very well, Sangaku Shoujo. I won't be attacking you in the slightest. Toshinori took several steps away from Tsukachi and the girl. You win if I end up lying on the ground or surrender. You can do whatever you want, but you only have 3 minutes to win. Otherwise I do. Sound good? She nodded in agreement, already doing some stretches while Tsukachi watched in worry, only being mildly mollified when Toshinori waved him off. Sangaku cracked her knuckles and swiftly threw out a punch. Tsukachi briefly wondered why she hadn't gotten closer until her forearm stretched forward rapidly, shooting her fist towards Yagi's face in an instant. Rubber pistol! Oh! Tsukachi complimented while Toshinori easily dodged the attack. An elasticity quirk with actual rubber-like tendencies giving how quickly her fists snapped back after she missed. Rubber Gatling! Murakami's voice cut through the swooshing of elongated fists flying through the air to add his own unhelpful input. Come on, Sangaku. You just have to be faster than him. You know that, right? Can't be that difficult. He hasn't even moved his feet yet. Tsukachi frowned as Sangaku snarled while jumping upwards a bit to stretch her arms back a lot. Rubber bazooka! Toshinori crossed his arms to block as the double palm strike sent him skidding backwards until he stopped. With a grunt, he uncrossed them and sent Sangaku flying backwards herself. Sangaku quickly righted herself and grinned in excitement, an emotion matched by her classmates if the murmuring was anything to go by. She spread her legs apart and placed her fist against the ground. Gear second. Sweat-borne steam bursted forth from her body as she pumped her legs and caused her skin to rapidly turn pink and shiny from the sheer heat her body produced. Sangaku panted as she readied her fist, placing one hand forward while readying her punching arm. Rubber jet pistol! Tsukachi flinched as the girl's punch nearly broke the sound barrier, causing Tsukachi and the others to recoil as the attack slammed against Toshinori, sending him skidding as his form was obscured in an immense dust. It seemed like an instant victory, an unquestionable win. However, time up! Toshinori declared as the dust cleared, revealing himself to have caught the super attack aimed for his chest with just one hand. No way! Sangaku panted as her steam faded off with her hand propped up on her knee as she fell to the other. Toshinori released her hand and walked over to give her a shoulder pat. Good effort. One thing, though. Considering just how rubber-like your quirk is, I recommend applying all possible uses for it. Beyond stretching and what you just used, there is bending for your ridiculously flexible bones, inflation for enlarged limbs or body parts, or even hardening for extra durability. Hardening? Sangaku furrowed her eyebrows in confusions before suddenly snapping her fingers. Like car tires and vulcanization. Thanks, Yagi-san. My pleasure. And now back to your actual teacher. We don't want him to get angry at us. Tsukachi gaped at what he just saw while the girl slowly wandered back to her classmates to tell her epic tale. Since when can you do that? Toshinori actually had the audacity to look confused. Since forever? That girl hit you with more than enough force to dent steel. Tsukachi gestured at the miniature crater. I thought you couldn't use one for all without transforming. It's hard to explain. Toshinori scratched his head in confusion. I just called up the miniature amount I needed to endure that. Besides, despite my appearance, I'm still pretty muscular and durable. Just not as much as my muscle form would be. Tsukachi sighed. Your body is weird. This body isn't my fault. Toshinori actually whined. It's that jackass's fault. Excuse me, sir? A boy stepped forward from the group of students, much to Murakami's dismay. Can I try too? Toshinori raised his eyebrows while Tsukachi pulled Murakami aside. He'd start his questioning while Toshinori kept the students busy. Murakami-san, I don't think that your students are in any more shape to pay attention to your lessons, Tsukachi stated bluntly, uncaring for the wince that carried across the teacher's face. So, let's go ahead and answer my questions, alright? Alright. Murakami stuttered as he watched Toshinori tangle with a kid who had a quirk similar to Midnight's, somnambulist. While Murakami was distracted, Tsukachi discreetly activated the hidden voice recorder under his collar. First off, in the previous 3 years you taught Midoriya and Bakugo, were there any periods in which either of them showcased strange relationships with other classmates? Bakugo-kun was a wonderful student with a top-tier quirk suited for heroism. Murakami lavished, barely hiding the greed in his eyes. He would have never associated with any suspicious character. Truth. And Midoriya? Murakami turned away in disgust, as if it physically irked him to say the necessary words. Midoriya wouldn't hang about any suspicious character either. He was just some annoying loner. Truth. Tsukachi's eye twitched in annoyance at that response. Alright then. Was there ever a student with a slime-like quirk of any sort in their time here? Murakami's eyes narrowed as he seriously pondered that question. No. I don't think so. There hasn't been one with a quirk like that in my entire work life. Quirks like that are memorable and I would definitely remember that. Truth. Tsukachi frowned at that. I see. Alright then, was there any female student who took an interest in Midoriya? Murakami frowned as an expression of comprehension crossed his face. Well, there was this one girl. She was a year above Midoriya but they still got along well. Plus, she was rather dismissive of Bakugo, despite his amazing quirk and prominent future. Truth. Really? Tsukachi charged ahead at this lead. What was her name? Her name? She was Oechy. Murakami was suddenly silenced and knocked out when a small block of ice beamed him in the head from the side. Sensei! Look out! The kid called out dully, either realizing that his warning was too late, or that he simply did not give a shit. Ah! Toshinori stood silently as he sweat dropped, his backhand still raised. It's cool. Sangoku waved an arm lackadaisically. We don't really like him anyways. Yeah. One of the kids nodded along. Too demanding. Not to mention lazy. He never actually helps out in this class. I'm just here for the free credit. You too? Truth. Toshinori and Tsukachi stared blankly at the students, too shocked to respond as few of them started taking pictures of their unconscious teacher. Were Midoriya Shounen and Bakugo Shounen's classmates like this as well? Midoriya? The boy put his phone away and pushed forward. Do you guys mean Deku-senpai? Tsukachi and Toshinori's eyes widened at that. You know Midoriya Shounen? Of course, we do. Sangoku stepped forward. I only knew him for 2 weeks before he left, but I learned more from Deku analyzing my quirk than Murakami-sensei for a whole year. Shame he's quirkless, though. Yeah, he had an adorable air around him. He cried a lot, though. Idiot. If you were born quirkless, wouldn't you cry at least once a day? I know I would. Well, he got into Yuri, so I guess of them allowing quirkless into their school was true. Lucky guy. He's smart at least, so I'm sure he'll last long in there. Truth. Not a single one of them is lying. Tsukachi thought grimly. None of the students were presently showing any malice against Midoriya, but just as it was a fact that the sun rose from the east to the west, it seemed that it had sunk into the students that quirkless were essentially handicapped people. At best. This is troubling. Tsukachi crossed his arms in worry. If any of them grow up with these mindsets. Is this what Bakugo Shounen started as? Toshinori questioned as he was similarly disturbed. Excuse me. Tsuchiya came hurrying across the yard. There you are. The principal is ready for you now. She frowned at the unconscious teacher for a moment before turning back to Toshinori. Without another word, they followed their guide and left behind a crowd of snickering students. This was not how I foresaw this meeting going, honestly. Lot less vicious than I expected with the students. Tsukachi whispered. It was strange to hear respect and derision mixed up like that. But that ultimately proves that Bakugo Shounen's mistreatment of Midoriya Shounen was more likely an ingrained instinct rather than genuine malice. However, that makes me worried about who they all learned it from. Toshinori thought back to that evening when Bakugo had apologized to Midoriya willingly on his own without being prompted. Well then, Tsukachi started and jumped up the 2 steps toward the door leading back inside. I've learned that there was a girl who was close to Midoriya-kun despite his quirklessness. We should look for more on that. Then I guess this is where we split up. Toshinori muttered. one to keep the principal busy while the other searched for unedited video footage. Tsukachi nodded along. Well then, let's make it happen. As Toshinori went searching after faking an important phone call from Nizu, he swiftly strode through the halls, searching for any door that looked important yet unlabeled. Unfortunately, nobody was stupid enough to label their security office in a school full of teenagers after all. Yagi-san! Toshinori stopped as the boy with a stronger version of Midnight's quirk appeared at his side. Deku-senpai really did get into the hero department, didn't he? Toshinori fought to fight down his proud smirk, but judging by the boy's sudden smile, he apparently wasn't successful. If you're looking for something that will help Deku-senpai, you're not gonna find anything useful by talking to the staff faculty. Let me take you to one of the few adults who likes Deku-senpai like I do. The boy spoke assuredly, dragging Toshinori by the arm. Oh, and my name's Kiyotaka Furushima. Toshinori followed Kiyotaka's lead, weaving through the halls until they reached a janitor's closet. Fukuyama-san's weird, but he'll help out. Kiyotaka bowed and moved ahead. Just tell him that you want to help Deku-senpai. Wait, what did Midoriya Shounen do to earn your admiration? Kiyotaka stopped and looked back before bursting into a wide smile. He saved me. When he was just 4 years old, he saved me from Bakugo team. I know he's gonna be awesome. A much better hero than Sparky Boom Man ever could. Toshinori breathed softly and chuckled as he watched his successor's first fan disappear around the corner. I should have recorded that. Really? Toshinori turned about to see the janitor himself, staring at him with an amused expression. The kid's preaching the truth, but who's his audience? Toshinori went in for a handshake. I am Toshinori Yagi, head secretary of UA High School. I am here to investigate on Midoriya Shounen's time here. Jun Fukuyama stared at him, causing Toshinori to feel like he was being x-rayed under his brick-toothed grin until his handshake was returned. Jun Fukuyama, Aldera's security officer. Nice to meet you, Yagi-san. Security officer? Toshinori simply smiled back, a bit unnerved from how eldritch his smile felt. Like it belonged on something more alien. I heard what happened to Murakami earlier. So hilarious! Nurafufufufa. Fukuyama grinned widely. That guy was a jackass. The fact that you're helping out that Midoriya kid only makes things better. Fukuyama unlocked the door to his office and entered, leading Toshinori into not a broom closet but a room full of monitors as he shut the door. Clever. They merged an important office with another as a disguise. Toshinori reluctantly complimented. No student would willingly break into a janitor's closet after all. So what do you need? I would like a copy of all video and audio tapes involving Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. Fukuyama raised an eyebrow. Why? Toshinori could have spun some elaborate lie, but considering that before him was the second adult of Aldera who hadn't come off as a very smashable douchebag despite the damage to Izuku's documents, he deserved some truth. While we won't deny the extra advantage of wanting to tear this school down, the truth is there's a recent villainess who has shown familiarity with Midoriya Shounen and Bakugo Shounen. Fukuyama sat up from where he slouched. Why did you figure to look here of all places? She called them Deku and Kaken. This is the only place where those names are popular, as they never referred to each other with any other names. Also, she has a slime quirk and was seemingly close to Midoriya Shounen. Fukuyama furrowed his brow. There hasn't been any student with a quirk like that in my tenure here. I see. Toshinori deflated a bit. It seemed that just like Murakami. But Fukuyama's confusion lowered to a saddened expression. There was a girl above his class that Midoriya was close to. I remember that because she was quirkless like him. Toshinori's brief joy felt punched in the gut. Ah, really? Midoriya Shounen never mentioned her dash. Of course he didn't. Fukuyama cut him off. My Shinjo died 2 years ago. While Toshinori reeled from this news, Fukuyama clicked on his computer and started to copy everything necessary into a spare flash drive. Here. Fukuyama placed the flash drive into the skeletal man's hand, which reawakened him. Just remember to do me some favors, please? Anything. If no, when Aldera comes crashing down, my fellow non-staff faculty members and I are gonna be out of jobs. Nizu will make appropriate openings, Toshinori promised. Can I safely assume that Midoriya Shounen is liked by the non-staff faculty? It's just me, Aguri-chan and the lunch lady, but what's not to like? Unlike most of the brats here, he's really nice and polite. Not to mention some of the tips he gave us for our quirks. Frankly, I'm not sure why he never pretended for quirk analysis to be a quirk for him. I mean, I sure as hell wouldn't doubt that. To be honest, either would Toshinori. The boy now had up to 30 volumes of hero analysis for the future, for Lady Liberty's sakes. Also, I think Fukuyama turned to play the copied videos. You should watch some of these here, to be prepared. There are especially 2 very bad ones in here. Toshinori Yagi was a very angry man when he stormed into the principal's office. So much for cool as a scalpel. You! What do you? Aldera Principal Fukushi Okiai began shakily, backing up with his hands raised to shield himself, when Toshinori took 2 thunderous steps to cross the room. Crack! A pencil Toshinori had been pointing at the principal snapped in his grip, and so did his patience with the staff faculty working at this school. A sun-like aura seemed to burn off him, and the flames raging around seemed sure to set everything ablaze despite its ethereal nature. Just what did Toshinori find? Tsukachi wondered. He'd been sitting here, trying to interrogate the principal who had either been dodging the questions or going off into a spiel about his latest talented students. The fact that Toshinori might have found something incredibly incriminatory was very likely. And definitely worrying considering the symbol of peace's rage. You have some explaining to do, Okiai, Toshinori growled out, still pointing at the principal with what was left of his pen. Okiai, shaking in his boots by now, glanced in Tsukachi's direction in a plea for help. It was only the need for the principal to be conscious that made Tsukachi intervene. If Toshinori knocked him out by literally glaring at him hard enough, all their efforts would crash. Glad you could join us again, Toshinori-kun. He was just about to talk about Midoriya-kun. Toshinori got right into the principal's face and Tsukachi swore that he could see small golden streaks of electricity flit across his face, which essentially implied the Midoriya upgrade might have affected even the leftovers of One for All, and the hero who had already passed it on. Okiai flinched every time one of them jumped the mere centimeters separating their faces. Ah yes, my successor. Okiai's face scrunched in confusion. Your sucky dash. You don't get to talk. Toshinori's voice had been low and dangerous, a burning heatwave rolling across a once peaceful landscape. But the second he funneled his anger into praise for his student, the hot atmosphere around them dissipated to a warm breeze. I will have you know that Midoriya Shounen is the kindest, smartest and hardest working person I have ever had the fortune to meet. But he's quirkless. I don't like your tone with that word. Yagi's voice grew pitched low and hot. His eyes were like tiny blue stars bursting into supernovas, fierce and blazing in the void surrounding them. Midoriya-kun's quirk came in late, Tsukachi added. A powerful copy quirk which lets him copy any quirk he wishes. Permanently. If you are aware of the term quirk compulsion, which can be defined as a person's mindset being altered to suit their quirk's nature, then you can believe that his creepy quirk obsessions was merely a symptom for what was coming. Toshinori turned around, pulled the flash drive out of one pocket, and handed it over to Tsukachi. Load it up. Tsukachi accepted the drive and pulled out his laptop. There were well over 50 video snippets on the drive, camera footage from all over the school. Also, according to the dates, almost the entire time of Midoriya and Bakugo going to school here was covered. For a moment, Tsukachi wondered why these files still existed. But then he remembered the principal bringing up Midoriya himself, wanting to pile more misfortune onto the child while barely disguising his words. He still wanted to expose him as a fraud who didn't deserve to become a hero. Not that it would have been of much help. Tsukachi thought when he watched the first clip, Midoriya being shoved in a hallway by a classmate and a teacher walking by without giving a damn. Noticing how the others were watching from over his shoulder, Yagi with anger contorting his face and Okiai with fright, Tsukachi set down the laptop on the secretary's desk and took a step back. Sit! Yagi demanded with all the authority of the number one hero. Okiai, unable to refuse, took back his seat while Yagi, who had probably seen every bit of evidence already, stood on the other side of the table, watching the principal's every move. Fixed in his place by Toshinori's glare, Okiai was forced to watch the events unfold on the laptop in front of him. Tsukachi watched with him, and with every new clip, his scowl deepened. Some of the camera angles weren't the best when it came to actually figuring out what was going on, but the tuft of green curly hair belonging to the kid being the victim in all of these clips was unmistakably Midoriya's. And a victim he was. Being shoved, having his desk and possessions taken away or destroyed, being barred from entering or leaving rooms. And the words thrown in his direction. Tsukachi clenched his fists when, "Nobody needs you, reached his ears. And worthless Deku, and wannabe, and bug, and creep, and whatever else cruel children could think of. None of the adults outright said these things or got physical with him. But they walked by without doing anything or even encouraged the instigators with facial expressions and gestures. They blamed everything on him that could be blamed on him even remotely. They either ignored him in class or, in the other extreme, picked on him for wrong answers and dismissed his right ones. These people are so lucky that Midoriya-kun never considered villainy, Tsukachi muttered. If he did, this place would definitely become his first target. Over the course of 3 years covered by the footage, Tsukachi saw a small boy with hope still shining in his eyes, slowly turn into a shell of himself. He was holding himself differently at the end. Not cowering, but making himself small, more difficult to spot. And he flinched every time Bakugo came close to him. Looking back on it, I can't remember the last time I was in your presence, and I didn't flinch if you looked in my direction. Such true words. Toshinori thought sadly as Izuku's tirade against Bakugo crossed his mind once again when he heard the explosion owner's voice from the videos. He keeps flinching. Bakugo was not responsible for all the abuse Midoriya suffered, but he was rarely far from whatever was happening. This footage. Okiai started when the last clip ended. He was pale as a ghost and fidgeted with the cuffs of his dress shirt. Shouldn't exist? Toshinori replied with eyes narrowed to slits. I thought as much. Unfortunately for you, the underpaid young man who looks over the footage every day is quite fond of Midoriya Shounen as it turns out. Not much company in a stuffy office on a normal day apparently, aside from the boy who is forced to hide from his peers too often. He saved a copy of every recording and spread them out to every other trustworthy adult he could find in the school, hoping for a chance to put them to good use. I guess that was their own way of helping Midoriya-kun. Tsukachi navigated to the last files on the drive, 2 short clips which were for some reason separated from the rest. He halted for a moment when he noticed the dates. The first was 2.5 years ago, and the second was the day of the sludge villain incident. The first video showed the inside of a storeroom. There was a girl with bluish-gray hair being forced to the ground and stomped on by the other students in the room. Other than the bullied girl, there were 6 boys and 2 girls present. Stay fucking still! Look, she's got bloody snot coming out her nose. Jaya ha ha ha. One of the boys kicked her legs harshly. Hee hee. Nobody ever uses this room, and the teachers never come around either. We're gonna treat you real nice here. The girl being forced down was my Shinjo, Toshinori whispered. At Tsukachi's unspoken query, he continued. The only other quirkless student who passed this school's halls as well as Midoriya Shounen's only friend. She died 2 years ago. It's no use screaming for help either. No one's going to hear you. To prove his point, the second boy punched her in the stomach. As she screamed and cried from the pain, nobody responded from the outside. Hey, she's pretty hot. The third boy cast a lecherous grin all over her body. Risa, we're really gonna do this, right? The ringleader put a cigarette to her lips. She's a virgin, so why not give her some nice memories, Hey, did you hear that? Girls are scary. It's her first time and she's going for a 6-way. How wonderful! The third boy bent over her form to roughly choke her neck. I'm telling you, it's gonna be fine. I'm gonna make you feel real good. The girl turned her head, looking away from the assailant who growled at the rejection. What's this? Bitch! What are you doing, turning your fucking face away from me like that, H-U-H? Got the camera ready? The ringleader asked the other girl who displayed a rolling camcorder. The third boy had just ripped off Mai's buttoned shirt when the door bashed open, revealing a heavily panting Midoriya with a metal baseball bat in his hand. Deku? Tsukachi let out a small breath of relief at Midoriya's surprising arrival. Ignoring the call of his name, Midoriya took one look at the situation before going into action immediately. He smashed his bat against the second guy's head, then kicked in the already unzipped crotch of the third guy over Mai. The first guy got up front and yelled something about being from the boxing club before Midoriya cut him off by thrusting his bat right at the guy's teeth. The fourth and fifth guy tried to flank him, holding on to his arms with their superior strength, until Midoriya took advantage of that to lift his legs up and then smash his heels right into their kneecaps. The sixth guy, who had just whipped out a knife, took a long look at his fallen accomplices before dropping his knife and trying to make a run for it. He didn't make it as Midoriya used both arms to bring his bat down on his skull. You're shitting me. The ringleader stepped back in shock as her female lackey ran off. Useless pieces of shit. The girl growled only to quake as Midoriya came up to her. He was a lot shorter than her, but at the moment, he looked like a dragon paying attention to the annoying thief trying to manhandle his treasure. I'm not going to say, make up for what you've done, or apologize to her. Midoriya spoke as the girl slid down to her, but in terror at his soft voice, which still carried enough venom and rage to be felt through the camera. I don't want to hear your insincere apologies anyway. Just promise to never bother her again, or you will regret it. What the hell can you do, huh? You're just a quirkless freak like her dash. The girl screamed only to choke when Midoriya placed a hand on her shoulder. Yes. I'm quirkless. My senpai is also quirkless. And every other person in this room has a quirk of their own. But still, if I'm supposed to lose to you all, why then are you cowering before me? The girl shook violently before fainting, suddenly collapsing as she foamed from the mouth. Midoriya sighed at the sight before hurrying over to Mai, who gratefully took his hand as he helped her to her feet. After donning his Gakuren top over her upper body, he carried her on his back and left the room. After it ended, Sakachi breathed heavily. Where the hell are these students currently? Unknown. The principal whispered. A while after this, all of them transferred out of the school. That won't save them from me. And you didn't bring any attention to this because if this was uncovered, Midoriya-kun would be heavily commended, despite his quirklessness. There's also the fact that he intimidated their security officer into keeping quiet about this. Tashinori added. All the nurse and the poor man could do was send her home with Midoriya Shounen as company, especially as my Shinjo already knew you would definitely cover it up. Yeah, this is enough to clap you in handcuffs right now. Okiai whimpered as Sakachi made a call while Tashinori started the other video. It started as many of the other videos started, with a conversation between Midoriya and Bakugo. Bakugo threw a notebook out of the window and intimidated his classmate. When he almost left the room and Sakachi wondered what made this clip so special like its other, Bakugo turned around and said just a few lines that inflamed Sakachi's own rage. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray that you get a quirk in your next life. Sakachi turned sharply to Tashinori. Tashinori. I know. Yui will address this. Tashinori sighed in disappointment, especially at old Bakugo's callousness, as he suicide baited who ironically was still the closest peer he had at the time. He didn't count the lackeys as even Bakugo had made no secret of him being aware that they were just following him around to leech off him. I've just seen 28 separate suicide baiters, excluding Bakugo. Sakachi snarled. Why in God's name would Yui knowingly let that piece of scum into its school? I'll talk to you about it in the car, Tashinori said finally. He straightened up and both Sakachi and Okiai stared at the part of the desk where Yagi's hands left very visible indentations in the metal. Fuming, the principal extended a hand and pointed at Tashinori in an attempt to gain back control of the situation. I could sue you for destroying school property. Hardly. Yagi responded with a snarl rivaling that of a lion ready to bite, and dug his claws further into the metal until it audibly groaned and tore. You covered up every instance of someone destroying property. What would make you decide differently now? Either way, my agency has a rather large fund to pay for property damage, and we hardly use it anyway, so this table shouldn't be a problem. Sakachi could see Okiai mouth the word agency in disbelief. The man clearly had so many regrets right now. Besides, you won't have any use for it or any other furniture in a few days. The demolition would probably happen before the week ends. Demolition? Yes. Demolition. Tashinori spoke clearly. That happens when a school is considered too rotten to fix. And no matter what you say, this is mostly on you. Okiai eyed the suitcase at Sakachi's side which contained the documents he just handed over willingly in Tashinori's absence. If he wasn't aware of their true purpose here previously, he was now. Of course, he still wasn't aware of the hidden voice recorder. You had a sworn duty to protect the students attending this school. And you failed miserably. Tashinori spat. Negligence is a criminal offense. As is abuse of power, blatant quirk discrimination, ignorance of attempted rape, intimidation of witnesses and tampering with official documents in multiple cases as I'm sure you're aware. Sakachi added. I'm a police officer. I can list them all offhand if you want. Only the fact that Midoriya Shounen didn't act on Bakugo Shounen's bait is saving you all from even worse charges. I hope you're satisfied. You failed all of your students and both of them especially. Midoriya Shounen by destroying his trust in the people who should be there to protect him, and Bakugo Shounen by instilling on him the mindset that the world is his for the taking without ever showing him any boundaries. Yui will have their hands full for the next 3 years correcting your stupidity. It was at this moment that a knock was heard from the door, and a policeman entered shortly after and saluted. "Tsukachi-san!" As Tsukachi nodded, Toshinori grinned broadly but without it reaching his eyes. "Perfect. Right on time. Have fun behind bars, Principal." With that, he turned on his heels and left with a nod towards the policeman. Tsukachi took his laptop and followed Toshinori out the door, who was already far away with steam coming off him in huge wafts. Tsukachi caught up in the car park and got his attention by tapping his shoulder. "We're far enough. Tell me how Bakugo slipped through UA's screening." "I'm not sure of the exact reasoning, but it's most likely a small case of carelessness. Even for me, my background was thoroughly raked through for my hiring." Tsukachi sighed at the disappointing yet realistic reasoning. "Well, what will we be doing about those helpful adults then?" "I'm going to talk to Principal Nizu about it," Toshinori replied. "He will definitely find good jobs for these people at least. And if he can't, All Might will." Toshinori sighed heavily and the steam began to dissipate. In a short while, Toshinori had calmed down significantly, and it didn't take long for him to smile again. Small but hopeful. "Can you do me a favor?" "What is it?" "Watch and help Midoriya. He grew up exposed to some of the worst evils of humanity. It's really a miracle that he never went into villainy, but now a villainess who has personal ties to Midoriya Shounen is now establishing contact and is very likely to change that. We'll do our best for him. I'll do my best for him." "Good. He's always deserved that much. Nurafufufufu." "Well then." Toshinori stretched his arms upwards till something cracked in his back. "I guess that ends all the bad stuff for today." A while later, if he had a time machine, All Might would go back to punch his jaw off. All Might. Toshinori looked about rapidly, trying to figure out where he heard his successors yell from. Tsukachi looked at him in confusion. "Toshinori? What's wrong, Dash?" Lightning exploded several miles away and flew upwards to break clouds apart, strong and bright enough to darken the afternoon sky above the city. Toshinori felt all the blood that he had held back from spewing return in vengeance up his throat. Why? The lightning was Midoriya Shounen's green. And that's it for today's episode, my amazing dreamers. What a wild adventure we had unraveling Deku's epic journey with the past users. Huge thanks once again to the incredible King Vessel for sparking this mind-blowing series. If you enjoyed the ride, smash that like button and make sure to subscribe for more anime awesomeness. Your support keeps this channel thriving, and I can't thank you enough for being the best squad out there. Stay tuned for more mind-bending, what-ifs, and remember to keep dreaming big, pushing boundaries, and being the heroes of your own story. This is Chronos, signing off. Until next time, catch you on the flip side, legends.